Blank Check is one episode away from winning 20 million rupees. How did they do it? A, they cheated. B, they're lucky. C, they're geniuses. D, it is podcasted.
Good. Sure. Great. Thank you. You could have said anything there and I would have been happy.
Written.
I think the poster for this movie is so bad.
It is. It's wild how chaotic it is.
Please weigh in on this.
Hi.
Just what do you think of the poster?
Well,
Before we introduce you, we will introduce you, I promise.
Your screen went dim. Hold on. Hit the yeah.
Look, it was 2008 and
It was 2008.
That was when floating head posters were at their peak.
His head be floating.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like 4 different bad trends at the same time. I feel like it's also a poster that has like multiple taglines on it.
It does have a couple taglines.
It's the multiple choice structure, but it's different than the opening line I just read.
Right. It's got these sort of simplified Who Wants to Be a Millionaire motif.
Mhm.
The font is bad. Font looks really trashy.
Can you read what the question
What does it
is?
take to find a lost love?
Okay.
A, money. B, luck. C, smarts. D, destiny.
Yeah, that kind of sucks.
All of the above?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a bad poster. That's all. I'm just saying it's a bad poster.
It is. It's an incredibly busy poster.
And the British one sheet was this,
right,
which makes it look like it's like a comedy about a couple who gets married.
Yeah.
Calling it the feel-good film of the decade.
It's just wild how different the two posters are. Because the American poster basically feels like it's hiding both of its actors' faces.
Right.
Even though it is a giant floating head poster, it is a floating head that is so dim.
Yeah, in shadow.
Right.
It's like he's a Sith waiting to be revealed.
He does,
like
he does look villainous.
He's a little Sidious-y, I think. Absolutely. Yeah. You know what's wild?
What?
This movie made $150 million domestic.
It made $141 million domestically and almost $400 million worldwide.
Yes. So I was interested in this stat because I think this is a thing we'll probably talk about a fair amount. This movie won Best Picture.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But it was like maybe the last time there was a Best Picture winner that was this popular with the general public. And this is the year that basically breaks the Oscars.
This is the year of no Dark Knight.
Right. Dark Knight not
And
getting
no
nominated.
Wall-E.
Yes. Wall-E, and to a lesser extent, also Gran Torino, I would say. You had these 3 movies that were like populist favorites that all failed to get nominations in lieu of Frost Nixon and The Reader.
Had to get Frost Nixon in there.
Slipping in there.
Yeah.
And the Academy loses their fucking minds and changes everything and keeps changing everything to try to solve that problem. Meanwhile, this is the highest grossing Best Picture winner of the last 15 years.
Like nothing has eclipsed
King's Speech beats it by a little bit overseas, but this beats it domestically.
Right.
And that's the only one that even comes close.
Yes.
This is the last time a Best Picture winner basically becomes a blockbuster because of it winning Best Picture too. That's the other thing. Like 40% of its gross comes after the win.
Wow.
Yeah, and the stat was that was the largest percentage post-Oscar win for any movie since Titanic.
How many Best Picture winners have we covered?
The Hurt Locker.
Yeah.
The Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
There are other ones.
Titanic.
The
Titanic.
The Titanic.
The Forrest Gump.
The Forrest Gump. Ang Lee won Best Director twice, but lost 2 times.
Yeah, he didn't win Best Picture. The Terms of Endearment.
The Terms.
That might be it.
So this is our 6th.
But we've covered a few.
We've covered a few.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah,
because we never covered. I don't even know what the funny answer is here. We never covered Cimarron.
Yeah, funny.
I don't know. I don't know what's funny.
Yeah, no. Who knows what's funny anymore? I mean, you can't say anything these days. Comedy is illegal. You're not allowed to make a joke about doing an episode on the Cimarron.
Introduce our podcast and our guest, and then we can talk about it.
This is a podcast called Blank Check with Griffin and David. I'm Griffin.
I'm David.
It is written.
It means
it is written.
Then I will say that. Yes.
It is written that it is a podcast about filmographies, directors who have massive success early on in their careers and are given a series of blank checks and make whatever crazy passion products they want. Sometimes those checks clear, and sometimes they win 20 million rupees. This is a miniseries on the films of Danny Boyle. It is called Trainspodcasting.
That's right.
There are many people who were disappointed it was not called Slumpod Million Cast.
Including me.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, call us out.
I mean,
You need the Indian perspective on this. I would have been okay with it. That's the only opinion you need.
that wasn't my
Millionaire.
Here's my thing, okay? So I'm very outspoken on this show about I like to go for the sweatiest combination of podcast and movie title possible. And then anytime we land on a title that is not sweaty enough for our listeners, they're like, oh, I guess Griffin lost the argument. And I'm like,
they didn't like that it was podcast away or whatever.
Right.
For Zemeckis.
which I want to do as Pod as a Cast, and you push for podcast news.
Yeah.
And your argument was if broadcast
Right.
is in the title, you
Right.
have to do it.
Yeah.
And I felt similarly, train spotting, pod is basically in there.
Right.
It's stupid not to do it. I understand Slumpod Million Cast is funnier in terms of sweatiness, but I was like, definitively, it's this. But that is what it's called. It's called Train Spodcasting. Our guest today, overdue on the show, Siddhant Adlakha, here to talk about Slumdog Millionaire, Best
Hi.
Picture winner.
Can I speak?
Yes.
Okay, good. Just in general.
Yeah, you
Just
are.
making sure.
Oh, you have infinite permission to speak.
No, I'm going to do that from time to time and be like, wait, is it my turn to talk?
Anytime.
There's no turns here.
No turns. It's
No
a turnless game.
turns,
Just a lot of talking over each other.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, some people don't like that, but
Yeah.
that is how it goes here. Welcome to the podcast. We're here to talk about the film that won Danny Boyle an Oscar
Yes. And as you
in the
said,
middle of his career.
almost by accident. It feels like this guy won Best Picture by accident to some degree.
A little. I'm sure he was not rolling up his sleeves on this project
No.
thinking like, you know what, I want an Oscar. And you know what? This is the movie to get it.
Yes.
Like, this is such obvious Oscar bait. This is such obvious box office catnip. Like, this is the kind of thing Americans will eat up.
Right.
It's just the way it took the sort of movie world by storm, starting with Toronto,
Mhm.
I think came largely out of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, infamously, this movie was originally going to be released by Warner Brothers, who had recently shut down Warner's Independent, their specialty arm. And they looked at this film and they went, straight to DVD. And they were like, we can't release this. This is going nowhere. And they were going to put it straight to DVD. And I think Danny Boyle and his team said, can we see if anyone else wants to buy it? Fox Searchlight picked it up for a song, put it in Toronto, it exploded. And then suddenly it became like the juggernaut, the unstoppable. And as I was saying, a populist favorite. Like this is the movie
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
that everyone wanted to see win Best Picture in the public.
I guess so. But there was so much Where's the Dark Knight talk.
Yeah.
But yeah, of the 5 nominees.
Of the nominees, unquestionably.
I think so.
Yeah.
I was more of a curious case of Benjamin Button guy.
That's fine.
Look, it's a movie I prefer.
I think I prefer that movie too.
Of the 5 nominees, Milk is my favorite.
Milk would probably be my pick of the 5 nominees.
Right. I don't really care for Frost Nixon or The Reader.
I cannot stand The Reader.
Yeah.
Frost Nixon is, whatever. That's like a can of seltzer. It's
Reader,
fine.
I think, is an abysmal film. Sid, have you read
Siddhant.
Siddhant?
Yeah, thank you.
Have you read The Reader?
I have not read The Reader.
Read
I've seen The Reader,
Okay.
but I
read the book.
I've
You
read
read
the I've read like the title of the movie.
Sure.
So I
that
know what it
counts.
says. So it's The
Yes.
Reader.
Do
Yes,
you
okay.
like The Reader? Do you remember? That's the
I
Hugh
don't-
Jackman year, right?
I
never
don't
saw
remember.
The Reader.
Yeah, that was funny, but I
Right.
don't really remember The Reader. That was the first or the second year that I was really getting into like, oh, these are Oscar movies. I have
Sure.
to watch them. So
Mhm.
a whole bunch of like piracy because none of this had released in India at the time where I was living. But I don't really remember much of The Reader other than does she like kill herself at the end? Maybe, possibly.
I've read the book. I've seen the film.
Couldn't tell you.
Couldn't tell you.
Couldn't tell.
Well-
I believe it.
Yes, she kills
yeah.
herself. All
She does-
right.
okay, okay.
All
That's
right.
the only thing
I
I
just had to
remember.
scan the
Yep,
Wikipedia
yep.
page there.
Sorry for being a horrible guest so far.
No,
I'm just,
no.
Because of her complicity
no.
in the Holocaust.
Yes.
That book is good. That book is sort of
Really?
like an acknowledged,
Okay.
major work
Yeah.
of sort of like post-Holocaust German, like what, how do we confront and deal with, our feelings about this and the
Because
legacy of
I'll
this.
acknowledge the movie as a piece of dog shit about dealing with the legacy of, are we really going to nominate Stephen Daldry every single time
It's not a very good movie.
he makes a movie?
I was trying to remember, like, okay, what was that Oscar year? But right, that's the Hugh Jackman year.
Yes.
Where everyone was like, oh, is that going to work? Like, you're hiring a non-comedian to
Yeah.
host it. And then he did a good job and everyone sort of had a good time.
Yeah, and pretty much every year since then, people go, why don't you just hire someone like Hugh Jackman again?
Yeah,
There's a lot of Hugh
has
Jackman
anyone, forget Top, has anyone come close to Hugh Jackman as a host so far?
I think, well, no, David,
Look, I mean, I'm going to sound ridiculous saying this
Yes.
right now.
Yes.
Uh-oh.
But Ellen
I
did
agree.
a fine job.
I think Ellen did a good
as
job
host.
for 2 years. Yeah.
And that was after Hugh Jackman. Now,
Yeah.
Ellen is not a perfect person.
No,
But
a kind person, but has some other faults.
But I remember those
Deeply
shows
kind.
being fine.
Generous,
and her
thoughtful.
being, like,
Yeah.
she's a pretty seasoned.
Yes.
I guess only one of hers was post Jackman. The first was
Okay. She was the bread and the Jackman sandwich.
Post Jackman is Steve Martin, Alec Baldwin,
Right.
which I remember being kind of a dud.
Yeah, but the Martin solo years were
Those
good.
are amazing.
Yeah.
Franco Hathaway obviously doesn't work. The Crystal
You
comeback.
think that didn't work? The Franco Hathaway?
It didn't work, but it's aged great.
Yes.
The Crystal comeback obviously was sort of like everyone was like, "Oh, right, this is why we actually
we
didn't wanna
took
do
some time
this."
away. Yeah.
Seth MacFarlane.
Uh-huh.
So it's getting really. Maybe that's
Yeah.
also with Ellen came in. You're like, "Oh, right, a comedian who
Steady
can host a
hand,
show."
right.
Okay. Neil Patrick Harris, another problem.
Yes.
Show.
Which felt like them trying to replicate the Hugh Jackman thing of
Mhm.
get someone who's more of an entertainer than
Yes.
a comedian, but is light, can be funny.
But then they did Chris Rock's second stint, which I remember being quite funny.
Yeah,
And then the 2 Kimmel years, which were like fine.
sure.
And then 3 years of no host, and then the Regina Hall, Amy Schumer, Wanda Sykes trifecta
Yeah.
last year.
Which it's funny, you don't even remember that they hosted the show last year.
No,
For how
Will
memorable that
Smith's
show
right
was.
hand hosted that show
Basically.
last year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happened.
Yeah, he
That
slapped
happened.
Chris Rock.
Forgot all about that.
And did you hear they're going to have Oscar cops this year? They've assembled
Thank
an
God.
emergency task
That's what
force
we need.
to make sure no one gets slapped.
I just love the idea of them like running scenarios.
Yeah.
Being like, all right, okay, maybe Tom Cruise is gonna like pour soup on someone's head. Like, what do we do? Right? They're throwing out
They got a
scenarios at
contingency
people,
plan
right?
for everything.
You had an Oscar cops take. You seem like you were gearing up
I
to
was
say
just-
something about the Oscar
I
task
was
force.
just going to say, I wonder if they're going to bring up the slap at all.
Oh
Yeah.
No, they won't touch
Kimmel?
that.
No.
no!
He
He's
won't
going to
go
be
there.
respectful.
Yeah. Look, it's been almost
He's
a year.
gonna ride out on a plaster cast of a hand, right? Like he's gonna go all. You have to.
Yeah,
No, Kimmel. It's been a year.
it's been a year.
It's been a year.
I don't think this is too spicy a
Yeah,
take.
it's been.
Yeah, man. I don't think this is too spicy a take, but this is a thing I've thought for a while. Okay, everyone's wait. How did this happen? How could this happen? In what universe could Willard Smith think it was a good idea to get on stage?
That's his full name.
And
I
slap
did
him.
not know that.
We
His name
fucked
is
up
Willard
in a Men in
Smith.
Black episode, and people were dragging us for calling him William. I didn't realize it was Willard.
I knew it was Willard. I can't believe I called him William. It might have been a self-aware joke by me.
Willard Smith slapped Christopher Rock. Okay,
Is it Christopher? Are you sure?
I hope it's not Christian.
It's Christopher.
Great. Who?
Imagine
One
if his
out of
name
two.
was Christian Rock.
I know.
That would be really good.
I'm sorry.
I mean-
I've never heard that before. That's so
That,
funny.
that would
Oh,
be good.
shit.
5 comedy points.
The fact that he's called Chris Rock, that's
Yes.
just his name,
Yeah.
is pretty great. That's
Yeah.
like a performer's name.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Right.
His dad, I think, was called Julius Rock,
Yeah.
which really is a good name.
Both of his brothers do stand up. Tony
Yes.
Rock.
Yeah.
Right. But Chris is the
Rocks.
best one.
It's a great name.
Rock's a great last name for a comedian, but like Chris Rock is the best
Rock.
combination. The Rock,
Yeah.
one of our
He
funniest.
should have called his kid the. Anyway.
Kid Rock.
Look, there's a lot. Soft Rock. You call
Yeah,
your kid
yeah.
Yacht. Yacht Rock.
You could call your kid Yacht
Okay,
Rock.
all right. Well, it's been a year. Yeah, people were like, "How
Classic.
could that happen?"
Yeah. No, you saying that the task force is going to have to like, how do you create the scenarios? Prague.
Yeah. It's my kid Prague.
Yeah. But you're like, what are the scenarios you run through with them of what they need to anticipate, right?
Mhm.
When the whole point is last year, I think the slap, there are obviously a lot of factors that go into that moment playing out the way it does. But one of them is there were 3 months of the producers of that show and the Academy in the run up to the broadcast continually saying, we want to like bring back the spontaneity and crazy things happening.
There was a little of that, and then of course there was also like we're gonna sit people at tables with stairs leading right up to the
Cabaret
stage,
style seating and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, I don't think that was in any way planned or orchestrated.
No, of course
But
not.
I think they consciously like nurtured an environment,
An intimate environment.
and tried to like be like and follow your impulses. Like if a moment takes over you, you know, I think that's the last thing they wanted to happen. But now basically, like if you're leading an Oscar task force, how do you define what are the spontaneous moments you want to have happen on the broadcast and which things you need to stop, like nip in the bud?
Here's the thing. I think the Oscar task force should be aimed at like just letting spontaneous things happen.
Yes.
Like letting problems happen.
Yes,
Like
this is my point.
maybe even like manipulating them a little
Absolutely,
bit. Because
push them.
what are the two biggest Oscar moments people talk about from the last decade? It's the slap and it's the Moonlight La La
Yes.
Land mix.
Yes.
But then, and in both of those scenarios, you just wish, like with the Moonlight thing,
Yeah.
you wish there'd been maybe just sort of, because I know it was the end of the night. So
Yes.
they really just had to like rush everyone on stage and be like, okay, well, you say your speeches
Yeah.
now because we got to wrap it up. But they should have just been like, all right, guys, 10 more minutes.
Yes.
Everybody settle down.
Air it out. Yeah.
You guys go sit down.
Yeah.
We got to give these guys their due. And with Will Smith, the weirdest thing was that it happened and then there were 20 unacknowledged minutes.
Yes.
They just kept doing the show.
Right.
Amy Schumer was apparently backstage being like, can I come out? And they
Yeah.
were like, well, there's nowhere for you in the run of show, you know, and
Yeah.
like, no one knew what to do.
And also
Will
there's
Smith
the-
was just sitting there.
And there's the ticking bomb of being like, he's gonna win.
he's going to win.
At some point,
What the
this
fuck
guy
is going
gets on stage, and then what does he? There was, I mean, we were at Marie's party at her old apartment.
Right. I was just at home. Yeah. I was
And
covering
the slap happens, and everyone for like an hour is debating was that real or not.
Sure.
And
yeah,
like
yeah.
you know, strong arm.
And there's
like,
the
arguments.
tweets of like Denzel is talking to Will Smith right now. Like, you know, like all that stuff is going on.
And like the tension in the room was just building and building and building until the moment he gets on stage and starts talking, and everyone realized like, oh, he's real, and it was real, and he's having a nervous breakdown right now.
Right.
But like no one knew what to make of it until that moment.
Yeah, I wasn't watching the Oscars. I wasn't at
Yeah.
home at the time. I was on my way back from somewhere. And then all of a sudden I started getting these messages from other people who aren't watching either, but have heard
Yes.
what's going on and these clips and all that. I'm like, now I have to tune in for the first time in years to
Yeah.
see if Will Smith wins after this.
Sure.
That was the reason I tuned in.
I mean, like the Oscar task force should exist, but it should be led by Andy Cohen.
Okay.
And all the members of the task force should be creative producers on different housewife shows.
Right.
And they should be like, we're going to keep everything in line. And then they start going to audience members and whispering in their ear,
He
like,
said you suck.
yeah, Kristen Dunst said you farted.
All right. Let's get on to Slumdog Millionaire.
Best Picture winner, Slumdog Millionaire. Runaway hit. A film that almost went straight to video and then
Yeah.
becomes a career-defining film for Danny Boyle that now he almost lives in the shadow of its success. Because also, a guy who did not feel like, well, he's obviously on an Oscar track.
Next in line.
Right. He was not someone where it's like, one of these days he's going to have his Best Picture breakthrough.
No. 1 year earlier, he had finally released the movie he said was like his biggest challenge to make,
Yeah.
Sunshine. It didn't make a lot of money.
Mm-mm.
And his whole press tour for it was basically just like, I'm so tired. And then 1 year later, he just is like, Best Picture winner.
His most successful film of the 10 years previous had been a zombie movie shot on a Game Boy camera.
Right.
You know, and like his beloved early films were like so angry, grungy, nihilistic.
How do you feel about Danny Boyle? What's your Boyle relationship?
Generally pro Danny
Yes,
Boyle. I'm sort of
right.
hit or miss on some of his recent stuff.
I mean, it would be
Right.
hard to be total hit. on
Yeah.
Yeah.
his
I don't think
recent
Danny
stuff.
Boyle's hit on the recent
Right,
stuff.
Like,
Thoroughly.
Which was that movie where it had like a twist every 5 minutes?
Trance.
Yes.
Trance.
That's the one.
Yeah. It'd be funny if you were about to say, which was that movie that had the, I don't know, the tech guy who creates Apple products? Like, but no, yeah.
What's that movie where there's a world in which the Beatles never existed? One guy.
No, it's, yes, you're talking
Yeah.
about Trance.
Yeah,
Trance.
but I'll say about Slumdog Millionaire, it's my second favorite Danny Boyle film where someone dives into a toilet.
You know, that's in a way, it's the most damning thing you can say about
Yeah.
this movie. Is it's not the best film in his filmography
With the toilet
with,
dive.
with the poop dive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's
He
a fair
really.
point.
I forgot how coded this kid is.
In poop?
Yeah, it's really like
Yeah.
Swamp Thing. It's
Yeah,
like
no, he-
full on top to bottom. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an exosuit.
And it's because people are suddenly blocking the door?
They put a door. They put a chair in front of the door
Right.
to prank him. I mean, that's
Okay, because he messed with the, yeah, right.
it is my favorite moment in the movie. I will say.
It is the poop?
The guy is outside the outhouse.
He's like, I gotta
begging
go,
to get
I
in,
gotta
and they
go.
cut to him inside.
And he's saying like, look, this is a slow one.
No,
you know.
no.
Okay,
David,
what's the phrase?
It's the wording. He says, "Oh, it's a shy one."
It's a shy one,
I
which
think
is
that
funny.
is one of the funniest ways to describe a turd.
Yeah, like sort of a long relaxing session. That
Yeah.
you're in the middle
It's
of.
a shy one.
And that's just in the subtitles too. What
Yeah.
he actually says is basically, I'm shy or I'm embarrassed or something like that.
Oh, really?
But I guess in context, like that's the implication of it. So the subtitle is
Yeah.
like giving you the implication of what he's saying.
But see, I think that's I would relate more to the kid saying, "I'm feeling shy or self-conscious." It's a shy one has such a different meaning behind it and is
Fair
so
enough.
funny. I mean, the other thing with this movie is like Simon Beaufoy wrote the script in English entirely.
Mm-hmm.
And then when especially they started working with the kids, the woman who was credited as the co-director on this movie, who was the casting director,
Lovely Tandon.
yes, she was like, you should do more of this film in Hindi, especially with the children. So she was like translating the scripted dialogue in real time to the kids on set. But that's interesting that there's the disconnect.
Yeah. It happens a lot throughout the film, but that's sort of with every subtitle film.
Sure, yeah.
But especially if it's something you have to translate like very in the moment and
Yeah.
you can't think of like I wouldn't be able to tell you off the top of my head because I'm not a translator. Like
Sure.
what's the Hindi equivalent of it's a shy one, but specifically when you're referring to your poop.
Right,
It
right.
would take me a bit to get there.
Yeah. Okay, this movie comes out 2008, as you said, like a fucking hurricane out of the.
Yeah, debuted at Telluride. It won the TIFF People's Choice
Yes.
Award, and it comes out basically Christmas time in America, but I think that was its wide release. So limited release mid-November. I saw it at the Angelica.
I saw it at the Angelica as well. I remember seeing it opening night. I was so amped for this movie because it was
a lot
just
of
that
hype
feeling.
out of the festivals, and Danny Boyle's back, and all.
Well,
that,
if you're like a film nerd and you're not a professional film critic like you two esteemed gentlemen are, right? You're hearing like the festival buzz on these things for like 2 or 3 months, and you're like, when do I get to fucking see this thing?
Right.
My friends and I went to go see it. It was sold out.
Sure.
It was on like 4 out of 5 screens at the Angelica opening night. And we were like, what's the next showing that isn't sold out? And they were like 10:30.
Hell yeah.
And we were like, we're going to wait in the Angelica Cafe for 2.5 hours.
See Slumdog.
I want to see this with the hottest crowd possible.
Sure.
And we sit there and I'm like, this thing is a fucking triumph. This is undeniable. What a like emotionally overwhelming, like tour de force. Like Danny Boyle's like honed his style perfectly. And then as the season goes on and it becomes the sort of de facto front runner, and there's the inevitable backlash of like, is this thing corny and manipulative and sort of cliched and everything? I was like, come on, don't be cynical about this. It's Slumdog. That movie's undeniable, right? The week of the Oscars, I was like, I should go see it a second time. And I see it a second time and immediately felt none of this works for me.
Oh no.
I now completely, like all of the charm has disappeared for this movie now. I feel like I see all of the sort of strings. Had not seen it since then. My second time in theaters that year.
Sure.
Watched it again. I like none of this movie was working for me this time.
Really?
Yeah, I was surprised. I thought I would be more generous to it, but it was like one of the wildest first to second viewing shifts I've ever had.
So now what's your relationship to this film?
So I liked it the first time I saw it. And I liked it this time when I saw it earlier in the week.
Mhm.
But I've hated it for years.
Okay, so I'm with you.
Yeah.
That's fairly similar to me.
Mhm.
I didn't love it as much as you did on my first viewing.
Mhm.
But I was like, I can see why this is so popular.
Sure.
I thought and then I soured on it quite quickly.
Mhm.
Probably like you're sort of describing as the sort of, as it became such a big deal, I was like, wait, I didn't sign off on Best Picture here.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. And then I remember that Oscar year, like it wins a lot of awards, and you were sort of like, it got a little boring, like it
Mhm.
felt a little sort of, and my opinion of it had really soured.
Mhm.
I rewatched it just now, but then I've now been watching the Boyle movies.
Yeah.
I rewatched it. The first hour, I was like, this is fantastic.
The-
And then I remember the second hour loses me more, and I did kind of I sort of evened out on it. But I came out positive.
The youngest,
It's a flawed film.
the youngest group of the three actors,
The little guys.
are so good. The little Slumdogs are so good, all three of those performances, that it does kind of, like, the movie does shoot out of a cannon at the beginning. My other main takeaway is Dev Patel is pretty incredible in this.
It is interesting to watch it now.
Yes.
Knowing what a sort of like variety of performance he's going to give. He is excellent in it.
Yeah.
I feel like at the time I was dismissive of him because I loved the kid so much.
Yeah.
And his performance is more subdued
Yes.
and natural. And I was kind of like, is he just kind of being himself? Like,
The kids are so charismatic, right? Is he just sort of,
but no,
a blank slate?
Do you like Dev Patel in general in this film?
I do. In general, yes. In this film, emotionally, what he's doing works.
Yeah.
Every time he opens his mouth, it's a little bit weird for me, just because, and I'm sure we'll get into
Let's get into it.
what this movie sounds like to me as someone from India. But I will agree that the first 40 minutes of this movie are just a firecracker with the youngest kids, with the whole thing in Hindi. It doesn't just sound authentic, but even like outside of that, it's so propulsive and it just keeps moving. And like every second scene is them running.
Yeah.
Running.
Yeah.
The camera work is I love like the colors. I love like the sort of switches to the handheld camera and all that.
The movie basically peaks at the paper planes train sequence.
Yeah.
That's when you're like, this thing is really humming. And then it also just, I feel like a lot of Best Picture winners, the movie then from that point on starts to become pretty obsessed with punishing its characters, like making them go through like biblical trials.
This is why that British poster that calls it the feel-good movie of the year. Obviously, it's a film with a big happy ending.
Yes.
I get that it sends people out of the theater feeling good.
Uh-huh.
But it is a really dark, miserable movie
Yes.
in a lot of ways, with a lot of, like over-the-top Dickensian punishment.
Yeah, like
Children, orphans being blinded, and, he's being electrocuted in the first 5 minutes of the movie, by the sort of like ostensible kind of nice cop, like a lot of this shit.
I forgot that like him winning Who Wants to Be a Millionaire is immediately intercut with his brother being shot to death in a bathtub full of money.
I remember the bathtub.
I remembered how that sequence, and even my first time watching that movie, I was like, this is maybe not totally working.
Yeah.
I forgot that they cross-cut it so instantly. Like he has 3 seconds of celebrating that he's won before you cut to the brother.
Yeah, it just, the entire adult Salim part of it doesn't seem to work for me, just because I can't seem to trace how he goes from like, I'm a gangster to, I'm gonna redeem myself and
it's very
shoot
quick.
people. Yeah.
Yes.
I remembered more of him, and he's actually barely in it.
Yeah.
Like he really is a minor.
It's also
presence.
It's the worst performance in the movie.
He's not a terrific.
I remembered being like, oh, he's really dropping the ball. But I also, I remembered it being a bigger chunk of it.
Like I remember more Freida Pinto in this movie.
Yeah.
She's really not in it much.
No.
I think the adult Salim, at least in my estimation, some of it has to do with the lines he's given,
Mm-hmm.
because again, he speaks English, but like the actor speaks English, but he's
Madhur Mittal. is his name,
speaking it in a very stilted way, as if these words aren't familiar to him, and a lot of the script seems to suffer from that, except when it's Dev Patel, because he speaks British English to begin with.
Yeah.
But with Madhur Mittal, these are not words that he would say, so it sounds very like, and it's not words that at least me as an Indian viewer
Mhm.
would be used to hearing coming out of someone's mouth, like it is our destiny, brother, and stuff like that. I know it's meant to be this thing of like, are they speaking English? Are they speaking Hindi? Or this is for Western audiences, so they can just say whatever.
Yeah.
The lack of authenticity, unfortunately, sometimes impacts the way it's performed. And I think so emotionally, some of those moments don't connect, because I don't think the actors are necessarily connecting with them.
No.
He's got a good look. He's very like sort of the hair, the kind of like, I don't know. He looks kind of cool.
Yeah.
I forgot that he was in $1 Million Arm.
Oh, that same actor?
Yes.
Okay.
Same actor is one of the 2 baseball prospects in that movie.
Okay.
I think that's the smaller role, but still.
I even think though that like the middle-age version of that character,
Sure. The sort of 12-year-old.
right,
Yeah.
also doesn't work as they like in the same way that in the final part, they make his redemption shift happen way too quickly. In the midsection, I feel like I understand what they're going for is this is a desperate kid in desperate circumstances. He's doing what he needs to do to survive. But I think even in that middle section, he is played like a little bit like joyfully nihilistic. Like he's getting some charge out of it. And it just feels like very quickly the kid becomes like addicted to being bad. You know? Like I just think that character is not particularly well written to begin with. On top of the dialogue maybe being a little dodgy.
The first time you saw this movie, were you living in India or did you see it later in life? Like, did you see it when it came out?
So, the US release was sometime in late 2008,
Late
right?
2008.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was still in India at the time. I ended up moving to New York for college in 2009. But when this came out in the US, there was already a lot of buzz around it from like festivals and this and that. And a friend of mine who, used to pay attention to all that told me like, hey, this award season, there's a movie that takes place in India that seems to be like picking up a lot of steam. And I was really interested. And I didn't know whether or not it would be getting an Indian release. So I ended up like either downloading a pirated copy or buying a pirated DVD or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And watching it around the time it came out here in the US.
Sure, late 2008. Sure.
And I liked it.
Yeah.
But I think, being an impressionable 16 or 17-year-old at the time, a lot of the opinions and conversations that happened afterwards made me feel like, this is exploitative and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, there is that element to it still. But I've never watched the movie and disliked it.
Interesting.
Even though there's parts of it I dislike.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
I feel closer to disliking it this time, whereas like my second time seeing it in theaters, I more just felt like bloom is off the rose a little bit. It's lost some magic to me. But I don't know, dislike isn't even the word. It's just like I was not connecting with it. But it's one of the weird things about like the lives that movies have that are outside of their own control, where I feel like so much of the souring on this movie is that there was this sort of like in so many eyes, this film was viewed as like, oh, what a triumph of like the Academy becoming more international and more global.
Sure.
Here's
By
like
awarding this British film.
Exactly.
British film made by white
right.
people.
And then I think people were like, oh, I love Indian movies, like Slumdog Millionaire, where they do Jai Ho at the end. You know? And it
what are you
starts to
gonna do
turn
with-
into like a shorthand, I mean, I just think about the amount of like trailers for bad American comedies in the 10 years after this where someone uses Slumdog as a joke title to refer to an Indian character.
Yeah.
It definitely happens in the Jason Bateman Spelling Bee movie.
Yeah.
I think it happens.
What is the Jason Bateman spelling bee?
Bad Words?
Oh.
His directorial debut?
I
It
missed that one.
happens in the Canadian Hayden Christensen comedy Little Italy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, look, with Emma Roberts, correct?
Yes.
Is that not set in New York's Little Italy?
I'm not sure. I haven't actually seen it. I've just seen scenes from it.
I think it happens in 30 minutes or less. Like it just became one of those really crappy shorthand jokes.
Not funny.
No,
Like,
never.
And
like,
I don't mean that in
what's
some
not
like
funny
aggrieved way.
was-
It's just like a boring joke.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, whatever.
Oh, it happens on Oh Hello, which is the John
the-
Mulaney
yes.
and
But of course, they are
Nick
supposed
Kroll.
to be
Yeah,
ignorant
right.
fools.
Oh, no, I
but-
enjoyed
right,
it that time.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But I guess that, I want to open the dossier
Please.
on this film.
Yes.
Quick question. Sorry to interrupt.
You can interrupt me
Has-
literally anytime. I'm not joking.
No, please feel free.
Like Best Picture winners since it, like The
Yeah.
Artist, has Slumdog Millionaire, do you think it's been sort of memory hold, as in like a movie that people don't really talk or think about?
A little bit.
Okay.
Do you not agree? Like, I do think it's. I mean, The Artist is a more extreme example where
Right.
that almost feels like a collective hallucination.
Right.
Like, not just that it won Best Picture, but it won like a lot of critics awards.
Yeah.
Like it was sort of this like universally, like, yeah, that's yeah.
I remember that film, like the first responses coming out of Khan and people being like, I'm going to sound crazy, but this thing might win Best Picture. And people were like, how is a fucking French silent film with actors that Americans don't? And they were just like, I'm telling you, this thing like hits people. It's down the middle, whatever.
Magic of cinema, baby.
Right.
You know,
But whatever critic
The
that was
dog.
like,
there was a dog.
there was the dog.
From Frasier.
Was it the same dog?
It was. It was
Okay.
the second dog.
Oh,
the second
right.
Eddie.
It wasn't.
No,
It
so it
was
was
a
a-
moose.
So it was a
It
career
was
Oscar.
Augie or whatever.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was a
Louis-
career Oscar then. Okay.
Yes,
Well, that's right. That was the
That's
thing.
true.
That was the thing.
It was that dog's true grit.
Everyone
Um,
had worked. Everyone had worked with him.
Yeah. No, but that same critic was like, that having been said, this film is going to win 0 critics awards. They were like, this movie is like too broad. Everyone's going to turn their nose up at it. And then it won like every critic award best picture. And now, as you said, I think feels like a collective hallucination because
The Artist is the biggest one where you're like, what happened?
that wasn't a crossover hit. It
Right.
remained pretty niche. And critics don't seem to think back on it fondly.
Well, and also the director, Hazanavicius, has not gone on to
Yes.
make other masterpieces. No offense.
Has
to
had several
all the garbage he's
basically
made after The
unreleased
Artist.
films. Yes.
Whereas Danny Boyle may be like, I mean, Danny Boyle has continued to make sort of interesting and different movies.
Yeah.
Like maybe has struggled a little bit under the shadow of a Best Picture win, but like he's a well-known director.
I think this film has like very little standing in like critical, serious-minded film communities. I do think just because it was such a big hit, it's the kind of movie that you hear people's mom saying like, I love Slumdog Millionaire.
I do think
it's so romantic.
People forget that because it was the runner-up for Best Picture at it was third place for Best Picture at the New York Film Critics.
Okay.
Mhm.
And Danny Boyle was the runner-up for Best Director, I believe.
Okay.
And it won Best Director at the Los Angeles Critics,
Mhm.
and so on and so. It was in the mix with
Yes.
critics. The sort of other big critic movies that year were Rachel Getting Married
Right.
and Wall-E,
Yes.
which like surprisingly won the LA award.
Right.
Like
it felt like critics were trying to push Wall-E over the threshold.
and it was championed by by many a critic.
It was certainly like well received at the time. I think that has totally been memory hold.
Mhm.
That is what looking back.
Yeah.
I was like, what were the big critical movies of the year? And I was like, oh, this was one of them. Right.
Right.
That I had sort of forgotten.
But
what is your
I think it's like an evergreen $5 bin at Walmart movie in a way that like keeps it in the collective consciousness, maybe.
Sure.
No, for me, it was a little different just because it comes up in a very specifically Indian context for me. But again, only from time to time. And it's like, oh, it felt at the time like a watershed moment for
right.
Indian talent on a global stage. And
Yeah.
of course, the last year or so with the success of RRR, I keep thinking like I haven't seen something like this from something Indian or Indian adjacent in the West since Slumdog Millionaire.
Yes.
But outside of that, I don't think about it as a movie, as a piece of art, as much as I do about everything around
specific
it.
cultural
A weird
phenomenon.
cultural curio. Yeah.
Yeah.
But not exactly an influential movie in a way. Although it's like, but then again, like it launched Dev Patel, who
Has
a
remained-
fairly enduring
yes.
star.
Yes.
It launched Freida Pinto,
Who had a couple years.
is in movies,
Right.
Sometimes,
But then you look at both of them and it was like, look at these two huge like Indian stars to come out of this film. And it's like Dev Patel was a British actor and Freida Pinto famously had like not gotten any work in India.
she was
Yeah.
basically an unknown.
Yeah.
But then there's other smaller things like Anil Kapoor being in
Right.
Ghost Protocol.
Yeah, and in 24 as well.
Right. Yes, he was in
Yes.
24,
He
which
had a-
was weird
And
in my
then
memory.
And then he acquired the rights to remake 24 in India, and he
Right.
played the Jack Bauer role.
I mean, no offense to the guy, but little long in the tooth. I guess Kiefer was kind of in his sort of late 40s when 24 came along, early 40s. I
I'll
don't know.
say that was the other huge surprise for me rewatching this movie. I think that performance is incredible.
Yes.
I
Oh, he's
remember
really good
at the
at this.
time thinking like this guy is so charismatic and transfixing, but I don't think I gave him enough credit for the actual like dramatic craft of that performance.
He's such a scumbag in the
It's
movie.
so
Oh
good.
my
He
Which
God.
is great. And he
so
never
well.
drops it.
No.
You're never
Yeah.
like, oh, you know what? He kind of came around at the end. You're like, no, fuck that guy. But he's so good at turning it off and on.
Well, and the Regis thing, like at the peak of real American
Sure.
Who Wants to Be a
Chris
Millionaire,
Tarrant for me, but yeah.
sure. Where it's like you're constantly playing the line of like, do you seem like you're about to deliver bad news or
Right,
good
right,
news? You want to throw people off. And like Anil Kapoor is doing that in his performance as a performance on the show.
Mhm.
But he's also playing the subtext of he doesn't want this kid to win. And he's
Yeah.
trying to psych this kid out.
And it's fascinating to watch from the perspective of someone who grew up with Anil Kapoor's movies, because he's like a quintessential nice guy hero.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
He's like a
Played-
face. He's
Yeah,
like
he
a,
played
right.
this character called Mr. India, who was like one of our big superheroes.
He's great. I
Kind
love
of.
it.
Yeah, and then seeing him play villain in this, and then play a villain in Ghost Protocol, it was a bit strange, but like, you know, good for him getting temporary Hollywood recognition.
Did you ever watch the show in India,
Mhm.
which is obviously, it's not called Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, right? But I forget what it's exactly
Kaun
called.
Banega Crorepati. But there's 9 versions of it in India.
Okay.
Wow.
In
Okay.
different languages.
But doesn't Amitabh Bachchan present it? Or had he at some point presented it?
Yeah.
Ben, I swear to God.
Well, we are talking about
We are.
I think this is adding to
It's
the
good, it's
ambiance.
good.
Yeah, which is what I wanted to ask. So you mentioned Regis Philbin. Right?
Yes.
Was he the host in the US?
He was
He
the
was.
original host
Yeah.
in the US.
Okay.
And he was, I would say, fairly crucial to its success in the US, as Chris Heron was in the UK.
Okay.
You needed, it's so much host,
Yes.
that show,
Yes.
compared to most game shows. Like, you really need someone who's going to hold your attention.
And Regis kind of played it similarly to this.
I'm on your side, but, you know,
Right.
what are you doing?
Right.
You know,
And
a lot
that's sort of
that.
shaking his head. Are you sure that's your
I mean,
final answer?
If B with this one, I mean, it could be A or C,
No, I mean,
maybe D.
the thing here was it was a huge show in the UK. They bring it over as a summer replacement series. It's like, who's going to host it? I don't know. Who do we have already under contract
It was
at
an
ABC?
ABC show, and he
Right.
worked at ABC.
Throw
so
it to
they-
old man Philbin. And then the show airs and becomes like humongous.
Okay.
And very quickly it became Who Wants to Be a Millionaire is on 5 nights a week.
They
Wow.
famously
it was so
it
popular.
revived ABC, which was a like at the bottom of the ratings.
Yeah.
And so they were like, well, you know what they want? This every day.
Every
and they
day.
burned out the
Right.
public's interest in it too quickly.
Like it
And-
was a summer show that then became a
What
fall
year was
show.
this?
This was 98, 99?
That sounds right. 'Cause
99,
The British
okay.
show launches in 97, maybe,
Yeah.
or 98. Yeah, it was. I can look it up.
But it got so overblown so quickly. I think the first guy wins the show. The first person to win the
99.
million
It was
happens
99.
within 2 or 3 months.
Mhm.
And that was like the fever pitch of the thing. And then they start doing it like 5 nights a week. And then it very quickly becomes like, we need to do celebrity episodes. We need to do special event episodes to keep it fresh. But Regis went from being this sort of like, obviously incredibly famous, but a little bit like taken for granted as like perennial, he'll always be on TV,
Mhm.
to being like the hottest man in broadcasting again. Like once again went to being like one of the most famous men in America, and everything was parodying Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Okay.
Yeah. So it had a huge moment, but like
it burned out fast.
yeah,
and then
by
it got,
2001,
Yes.
it's daytime syndicated.
it got moved to syndication.
So it's never been like a big movie star who draws eyes to the American version.
Not so
No.
much, because then it was
Okay.
Meredith Vieira, who was
Terry
another
Crews,
talk show.
Cedric the Entertainer.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
but the bigger
I think
stars,
Michael Strand, maybe. At
Maybe.
some point? Yeah.
they start hosting it deeper into its syndicated run, where they're like, we need someone bigger to boost the
Mhm.
ratings.
Okay, yeah, because the Indian versions have always been hosted by enormous names,
Right.
like to the point that like these are people that non-South Asians in the West have probably heard of. You have
Yeah.
Amitabh Bachchan, who hosted it originally, who's referenced pretty heavily in the movie. After him, the Hindi version was hosted by Shah Rukh Khan.
Oh, wow.
Who's like he's one of the most famous
Yeah.
people in the world.
Yes.
I mean, these are two of
yeah.
the most famous
Yes.
Indian actors of all time, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
It's like if Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt had hosted
Right.
Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Bigger, yeah.
Yeah.
like,
And
like,
I was gonna
aren't
say
they
the-
busy? I guess you can kind of knock a lot of them out
Yeah,
quickly.
but the show was so popular that like
it was worth it.
yeah.
Right.
And interestingly, the Telugu version has been hosted by Chiranjeevi, who is the father of Ram Charan. Who's
Oh,
an
yeah.
RRR.
Yeah, yeah.
And after him, N.T. Ramarao Jr.
Oh, so
Hosted-
both of their dads? Oh, no.
N.T.
And the
Ramarao
son.
Jr.
Gotcha.
Yeah, from
Okay.
RRR.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a big deal
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah.
And is it still? It's still a much watched thing.
Yeah, the non-Hindi ones are still. I'm not entirely sure if there's any Hindi version that's still on the air, but
Right.
at the time, especially when it first began in 2001 with Amitabh, it was enormous.
It is obviously it's a very durable format. It's
Right.
very easy to understand,
Yes.
and you can just revive at any time. You don't
It's-
have to tweak it.
It's just funny that when
15 questions.
when
you
this
know, like-
movie came out, it almost felt like it was nostalgic
Yeah.
for American audiences to watch a movie about Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And then I think they revived it again in
Oh, yeah.
primetime with Regis after the film.
just because there was such a bounce.
Yeah.
I understand that because so the music that plays in the movie, the Indian version, I believe that's from the American
Yes,
and the British
absolutely.
one? Of course, I've never heard
same
it
thing.
on those versions.
Interesting.
I don't think I've ever watched clips from any of those shows. But for me, this music conjures such a distinct feeling of time and place and intensity because it was so enormous in Indian households as well.
Yeah, no, I mean the music was 50% of the success of that show. You guys both know that Stephen Knight was one of the creators of Who Wants
The
to Be a
director
Millionaire.
of Locke.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Guy loves his hot seats.
Yes,
Yeah.
incredible. But it was just like the pitch on this show, beyond just like the stakes of here's how big the prize is going to be, here's how simple the format is just like some guy's going to fucking perform the hell out of these questions, right? Like he's in a David Mamet play. And then you're just going to have the most dramatic set and music of all
It's
time.
incredibly dramatic to the point that at the when it launched in Britain, there was that, a lot of the reaction was like,
Okay,
take
take
it
it
yourself.
easy.
Like, this is insane. Because the classic British, game show energy is much more like you're having a cup of tea.
Right.
And it's like you're going to win a dinner plate or something. It's not like you're going to win $1 million.
No, but that's like what Jeopardy is like. It's like sophisticated but muted. And other American game shows are like insane, over the top bananas. And this one was like, no, this is a serious intellectual exercise. Your life depends on it.
And it really launches like The Weakest Link and Deal or No Deal.
Yes.
All of these shows that are so host dependent and like vaguely antagonistic.
Yes.
And they
fiberglass sets and searching lights.
The host kind of being like, look, I'm your friend here, but also you're in trouble, buddy. Like the weird energy there.
Yeah.
Anyway.
The banker told me your wife is thinking of leaving you.
The whole banker thing in Deal or No Deal.
Banker's one of my favorite characters in all of fictional media.
All right.
Okay.
So, Slumdog Millionaire. Danny Boyle gets Simon Beaufoy's script.
Mhm.
This is how this begins. And the only preface is this movie's about who wants to be a millionaire. Danny Boyle is like, I hate that preface. I hate hearing that. I don't want to make a movie about who wants to be a millionaire, and is basically like, I don't want to read it. And this is what Danny Boyle said. He's like, they could have maybe told me like set in India, like
anything else.
Anything else.
It's a love story.
But he eventually decides, because Simon Beaufoy wrote it, he's like, well, I've heard of him. He wrote The Full Monty.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'll crack it open. And once he read a scene set in an outdoor toilet, he was like,
He was in.
I'm in. I want to make this movie.
The man likes his poop. Siddhant, you read Q&A.
I did.
And
So
you
it's
were
based on that.
telling us
obviously.
it is barely
my
anything
God.
like this
Now,
film.
Q&A is an Indian novel, correct?
Yes.
Like, it is not a British novel or anything
No,
like that.
it's written by Vikas Swaroop, who's an Indian author and diplomat who had stints in South
Is that some
Africa.
posts?
and
Yeah,
the
China,
US.
Canada, it looks like. Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
and like I know the book was popular and won various prizes, but man, by the time it was done, I threw it across my couch. Like I think it is such an awful book. Like it has a couple of ideas that I really like that I wish were explored more in the book, but also explored more in the movie. But just it is such a disjointed non-narrative
Mhm.
with like 3 out of nowhere plot twists on the last 3 pages that Simon Beaufoy, like, he made it a story. Like, it's
Right.
not a story without this screenplay.
Boyle obviously did not read the book. He read the script.
Yeah.
He's like, I maybe read the book later, and he was like, my movie is not particularly inspired by the book.
It is a pretty ingenious structure for dramatic
That's why I
storytelling.
really love the first half, because I
Yes.
feel like the movie lets go of the structure in
Yes.
the second half. I want to go all the way with like, tell me how every question relates to his life.
I wanted to stick to that.
As someone who's read the book in which that happens, let me tell you, it's a huge improvement that they don't do that.
Really?
Yeah.
Because it keeps going.
It just it kills any sense of tension, any
Hmm.
sense of momentum. But a part of that has to do with just the way the book is written.
Yeah.
First of all, I can't tell if Vikas Swaroop is a bad writer because the thing is, the entire thing is written in first person
Mm-hmm.
from the perspective of the main character,
Okay.
and so I don't know if, because I haven't read anything else by Swaroop.
And is it starting with the interrogation as well, or is it
yes.
mostly in the moment? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So the broad structure of like
Yeah.
the game show and the interrogation is the same, but it has almost nothing else in common.
Gotcha.
So it's all written in first person, and so I can't tell if he's writing purely 100% from the perspective of the character, or he's
Yeah.
just a bad writer.
Sure.
But also what's confusing is it's all narrated in the present tense, even when it switches
Oh,
in
weird.
time.
Right,
Oh,
right.
that's irritating.
And like, if that was just between chapters, I would be fine with it. Sometimes mid-chapter, it feels like you're reading the thoughts of Dr. Manhattan.
yeah. He is existing in all times.
Yeah, and it's... God, where do I even begin with this book? It's also much darker and much more grim than anything in the movie.
Interesting.
Like the prologue with the interrogation,
Yeah.
he gets sexually assaulted by a cop.
Jesus.
The first question he remembers because of something to do with sexual assault.
Oh, geez.
The
Okay,
third
so-
one, it's because someone gets molested, and like that. I think that's like the first 4 or 5
So
questions.
you're saying this movie is far less grim and intense than...
Yes.
Okay.
And-
And this movie is...
Yeah.
has some grim stuff.
Yeah.
And I will say, like, there's a narrative reason for all of this, which is fine. Like, I'm not one to say what should or shouldn't be depicted in a book.
Sure.
But no matter where this book ends up in time, if you can even tell, it just feels completely disconnected from everything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, there's no central love story. There's like 1 or 2 recurring characters. Salim isn't his brother. He's just like a friend who appears in a couple of chapters.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, whatever. That doesn't sound good.
No.
Mhm.
Boyle says, I like this quote from him. You read scripts, they're really good. Technically, they're excellent. They do everything they need to do, blah, blah, but they never glitter.
Mm.
They never really vibrate for you. This one did. So he loves this script.
Yeah.
He loves how Dickensian it is.
Mm.
And he is like,
Likes the poop.
patronizingly or not, drawn to like, you couldn't make a Dickensian movie about like life in modern Britain, maybe because
Sure.
of like, but like in India, it makes more sense. Now, I don't know how much Danny Boyle knows about what he's talking about in a way, but like he's drawn to like depicting the sort of like, the wild swings between wealth and poverty, right?
Yeah.
That like being on a game show could represent things like that, right? Like it is very Dickensian. Dickens always has these, people being suddenly elevated out of their circumstances and like what that means and all that. Like that is such an obsession for him.
Yeah, I talked about it in the Millions episode too, but there's that bizarre, or I think it was on the whatever. I've talked about both of these episodes because we've been recording them in a weird order. But there's this special feature on like the Trance Blu-ray that's Danny Boyle doing a career retrospective and like speed rounding all his movies. And he talks a lot about Slumdog through the framework of like, he felt intense, lingering guilt over the damage that the beach production did to that actual beach,
Oh, no.
both short term and long term. And that it was like part of the challenge for him on this movie is, can I make a film in a culture where I am not disrupting that culture itself?
Right.
There's still obviously you can debate the levels of cultural tourism in him making the film, but I think a lot of it was like this film had a very small crew, the way they worked with like children who were not professional actors. I mean, there's this very daring anecdote that they basically set up a college fund for all the young kids in the movie to make sure that they were set for life off of this, rather than giving them like
Sure.
all this sort of stuff. But I think that was a big part of it for him too, is like, can I go to a different place and not ruin the place by making the movie there?
Well,
almost as a self-challenge.
It's interesting. He's kind of self-aware about what he's doing here,
Mm-hmm.
because he says, like, if you think about it, that's not really a very good idea. White guy going and making a film in a place he's never been. I'm not a big fan of films that go and show white guys going around India, that kind of film. It's not my kind of film. I think culturally that kind of film has lost its place. We want people's stories from their own countries. So I think it's not a good idea to make it. But then I just at the time thought, oh, I love this place and I loved being there and I loved the energy of the city. It felt like New York in the 80s, he said. Like, it's just Danny Boyle is always doing this where in retrospect, he's like, I don't know how I feel about that movie. A lot of flaws.
Yeah.
I don't know why I made it, but he's like, at the time I was filled with energy and excitement. I think the movie, JJ thinks the movie he's talking about is the Darjeeling Limited. This is in JJ's research.
Oh, interesting.
Which is the year before.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, the other big thing with this movie is 20 Days Later is obviously the first film he shoots on video, but it's a very, very primordial form of video, right? And the advancements in digital video have been humongous in the 6 years between these two movies. Millions and Sunshine are both on film in between. And he and Dud Mantle are basically getting like, was this shot on red camera?
I think it was.
But there's this anecdote I always think about with this film that's really interesting, where they like, this was at the point in time where the red camera was being presented to all these
silicon
filmmakers.
imaging camera.
Okay.
Actually, it was no red. Yeah. But the
All
red
these
was a big
companies that had
digital
tried to make these revolutionary high-def digital cameras and tried to lure filmmakers like Soderbergh and Boyle in to use them. They show him this camera and they show him the image capabilities and everything. And then he went like, is there any reason it needs to be this shape? And they were like, what were you saying? What do you mean? And he's like, well, like a camera is a certain size and a certain shape because it has to contain like the room for film canisters. And you've built this like a camera. But if you're basically telling me like it's a lens connected to a sensor and then like a battery, none of this needs to be in this like block, right? And they were like, I guess technically you're right. And he and Dud Mantle basically unscrewed the camera and just figured out a way to put most of the guts of the camera in a backpack. So Dud Mantle was basically just holding a lens connected to wires. And they had like amazing flexibility in terms of being able to literally just run around with this thing. And I thought that's like such a smart thing to go like, oh, we're holding on to the idea of the shape and weight of a camera based on what historically has been a camera. If you're telling me we're shooting on video, then we should rethink all of that. What are the things we could never do with a film camera? And I feel like you feel that in just even his freedom of being able to like go into these spaces without traditional lighting setups, without a camera apparent, being seen by all the sort of citizens on the street. Like, I think they were able to be a lot stealthier in how they shot this film.
And if I'm not mistaken, this was also sorry to bring it back to the Oscars again, the first digitally shot film. Yeah, first digitally shot film to win Best Cinematography.
I imagine that's true, yes. Because it was still, pretty new.
Yeah. And looking back, it is a very digital film.
Yes.
It belongs to that era where people had just discovered digital color timing. It is, I think maybe outside of the first Magic Mike, the yellowest movie I've ever seen.
It's very yellow-orange. It makes your teeth hurt sometimes. I do kind of love how vibrant it is.
Yes.
But it is, because like, I'm trying to think of what the next, I guess Avatar wins the next year. So, right.
Real quick, speaking of the Oscars, I did a bit of research. I think this is the first movie to win Best Picture without a significant white character.
That has to be true, right? What even comes close?
I don't know.
Yeah.
There's The Last Emperor, but that has
it's not Sam Waterston, who is it? 'Cause he's in the Killing
It does
Fields.
have another white character.
Yes.
It's Martin Sheen, right? Who is it?
No, it's not John Hurt.
God, I looked this up just a
Peter
few
O'Toole.
ago.
Peter
Yes,
O'Toole.
Peter O'Toole.
Now I have to remember because Sam Waterston is in the Killing Fields.
Yes.
What is Martin Sheen in? Martin Sheen is in one of those sort of like Tony 80s films set in a foreign country, but I can't remember which. Anyway. Yes, but The Last Emperor is, of course, largely non-white. That is true.
Yeah.
But
just being technical.
No, Peter
No.
O'Toole's like the third, build guy in it. There's no doubt.
But look, semi-tellingly, it falls into a similar category with that film and also with Parasite, which is rare Best Picture winners with 0 acting nominations. It does
happen.
It does happen.
Yeah.
Look, it happens with Return of the King. It's not like it's without exception,
Right.
but it does feel
You
like
know what else happened with Gigi?
Yes,
That's one reason Gigi went 9 for 9.
because it didn't have to lose any acting awards.
Which is so weird that it didn't. Anyway,
I don't understand how you like that movie and don't nominate Leslie Caron, who I think
Exactly.
is the most undeniable aspect of a film I don't like very much.
It's very strange. It's because she didn't sing, is my guess.
Sure.
Her singing was dubbed. And I think it must have been some weird judgment about
But her performance is great.
Here's the other weird thing about Gigi, and then I'll shut up about it. I just did.
Have you
Gigi
ever seen
on
Gigi?
Scott's
No.
podcast, Scott Ackerman's podcast.
David just saw Gigi for the first time. A film that is demented.
It is a bizarre movie.
Yes.
Maurice Chevalier, obviously, is the old St. Kevin, 40 to the girls.
Yeah.
That's the song he sings in the
He
movie.
was nominated to a neighborhood watchdog list after that performance.
He was given an honorary Oscar that year.
Okay.
So they essentially were like, we're not nominating you for Gigi, but here's an Oscar for your whole thing.
Okay.
Your whole Maurice Chevalier, rich French guy thing.
30 years from now, you'll be a
You will
candle.
be Lumiere.
Right.
Right. Anyway, I think, I'm sorry, I was just trying to find what this Martin Sheen. Oh, it's Gandhi.
Gandhi.
There you go. Gandhi, obviously, Best Picture winner.
Mhm.
Yes.
But that has more white characters. That's
Yeah.
got evil English
Yeah.
villains and
I just think very
Things like
often when you
that.
have these films that have a largely international or exclusively international cast, none of the cast members end up breaking through to nominations.
Dev Patel came close.
And Dev Patel, there was the weirdness of whether he was lead or supporting.
That
That
was
I think
his
fucked
problem.
him.
He was nominated
Right.
for a Screen Actors Guild Award. I am, to this day, not sure if he's a lead actor.
I think
in this
he's lead.
film. He's not in a lot of the film. The kids are so crucial to the first half.
Yeah, but it's sort of Hopkins' Silence of the Lambs thing, where it's
Yeah,
like the
and
movie
he's
is so
in it
much from his
throughout.
perspective. Yes.
So I would err on this, but also because he was not a well-known actor,
Yeah.
they will often just sort of be like, well, put him in supporting.
Yeah, he did get the BAFTA nomination. though.
Yes.
They put him in lead?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Let's find out. And I believe he got a SAG nomination. Did he not?
SAG was supporting, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
It's also just wild that his one Oscar nomination he does get is like the same situation as this, where it's like, well, multiple people played the part at different ages, so he's nominated and supporting for what is the lead character of the film.
Wait, he wasn't nominated for lead in Lion?
He was nominated supporting for
Really?
Lion,
It's
which
the-
I think is capital bullshit.
it's
Yeah.
the same thing though, because there was a kid, and that's
Yeah.
how they got away with
Yes.
it.
Wow.
It's
And
just wild that it worked on that movie and he couldn't break
but
through
it was
on Slumdog.
partly like them being like, sorry, we snubbed you for
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
You know, like it was a little bit of
He's
that.
very good in Lion, and it was like
He's
it
good in
did
Lion.
feel like a mea culpa.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Remember Lion?
I
No.
love Lion.
Lion's good.
Love Lion.
That feels like a movie that's been totally memory hold.
Yeah.
Because that
Yes.
again, that director has not made another hit.
No. What did he do?
Didn't he do a Jesus movie with Joaquin
Oh,
Phoenix?
yes. He did the Joaquin Rooney
Did
Mara
that-
Jesus movie.
Did that ever come out?
Not really.
Like a little bit.
It snuck out.
It was a shy one.
It was a shy
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, it was a shy one. All right. Boyle likes the script. He
Mhm.
also keeps citing a nonfiction book called Maximum City, Bombay Lost and Found,
Okay.
written by someone called Suketu Mehta. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Which apparently he brought up so much in the press tour that he was told to stop bringing it up because they were afraid that the person who wrote that book would be like, am I owed some money? Like, are you adapting my book all of a sudden?
Am I wrong in thinking that after Slumdog, he straight out optioned that book to maybe develop that into a film?
I don't know.
Okay.
But that
I'm going to
sounds
look up
possible.
this thing. Yeah.
He also cites Titanic as a huge reference point. He loves the narrative structure of Titanic.
Sure.
And he says he's borrowing from it. The sort
Cutting
of
back
like,
and forth between the timelines.
you know, the
Sure.
person reflecting, all that stuff. Even though, of course, his main character is like 18 years old, not 100. Of course,
Danny Boyle buys film rights to Maximum City,
Makes
Bombay
sense.
Lost and Found, June 2009. I wonder if he bought the rights just so he wouldn't get sued for taking so much from the book retroactively.
he talks about, and I don't know if you have any perspective on this, that apparently the game show is more difficult, he says, in India than it is in America or Britain. Like he says, like the questions are really hard, really fast on that show.
Right, because in this movie, they make the comment that like, professors and scientists don't get past 16,000.
Right. That
And in
there's, like, a
America, the
steep
first
curve.
like 8 questions are always kind of like
Pretty easy.
fluff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's in India, the first few are generally easy to get you to that first tier.
Yeah.
But then after that, they grow increasingly difficult. And eventually, a few people won the big jackpot. But yeah, I have no point of comparison because
Sure.
I've never
Right,
watched
you
the
didn't watch
American
the
one.
Sure.
Yeah.
Film was funded by Pathé and Warner Independent, as you said,
Mhm.
Griff threw in $5 million. And then obviously later Fox comes in and
Right.
and takes some of that.
Because
money.
Warner's like, this isn't big enough to be a major studio release, and we no longer have a specialty division. We'll have a fire sale. Does anyone want this movie? We see zero value in.
So Gail Stevens cast the film in Britain, but
Mhm.
most of the film is Indian actors,
Yes.
not British-born actors. So Loveleen Tandon, who had worked on Monsoon Wedding and Vanity Fair from Mira Nair,
Yeah.
that's the connection apparently that
Yeah.
she gets brought in. And she said
She's
she loved the
first
script.
assistant director on Monsoon Wedding as well.
Possibly, I don't know.
I was looking at her IMDb last night. Yeah.
And she is this sort of like super integral member of the team, and that's why she gets this co-director credit that was so possibly inadvertently controversial.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because then people watch the movie, I think, and are like, well, wait a second. This movie has 2 directors.
Mhm.
Which is the weird thing about giving someone a co-director credit.
Well, same thing happened with City of God.
City of God had this, yes. Because co-director is probably not the word to use, because it just sounds like the movie has 2 directors.
I was reading interviews with him. I mean, I'm sure they're in the dossier as well, but basically he was like, we needed someone to function as an intermediary with the kids, and because she had done the casting and had found the kids.
And then she's writing the dialogue.
And then the dialogue has to be
translating
translated. So he was like, she was sort of there every day in a nebulous position. And then at some point, I think in post-production, he goes to her and said, what if we call you the co-director?
Yeah,
But the title basically came about much later.
I think somebody on the production said it was a title that came up over a Coke.
Right.
Yes, Christian Coulson, the producer.
Right. Yeah. It's just like, I want to give you some better credit for what you did.
And then so there were people going to bat for her, saying that, you know, she should also be nominated alongside him. But then I believe she came out and said, like, this is a bit embarrassing.
She was like,
yeah.
Right. I don't want to be considered that way. Like,
no,
that is not. Yeah.
What is fascinating to me, she has not a single film credit after this film in any position.
Wow.
That is weird.
Isn't it?
She's the one who convinced, Boyle that all the child acting should be in Hindi, not in English.
A masterstroke.
Right.
Yeah.
But then apparently Boyle says, like, he called Warner's and Pathé and was like, so we think like kind of half the movie is not going to be in English, actually. And what he said is the silence when I said that on the other end of the phone. You can tell they had thought he's gone insane. Like clearly, like his impression is like, they're like, oh God, you've gotten to the set.
Yeah.
And now you're going to produce something. Because I guess in 2008, that was just a much more aggressive concept. Now I feel like it would be almost like assumed, like, well, yeah, sure.
Right.
The film's set in another country. Like, it'll have subtitled dialogue. We can handle that.
The year after this is Inglourious Bastards, which I think quietly is kind of revolutionary on that front of being like, every character is speaking the actual language they would speak realistically in that situation.
Right.
And you have a film that is in French and German and English almost in equal parts and became a big hit. But I think until that point, it felt like box office poisoning people.
And, well, the thing about Slumdog not being entirely in Hindi is like, I don't think that in and of itself is a bad decision, just because, even if you look at the story, it makes sense for them to be speaking English beyond a certain point, when they're interacting with tourists and, at the end on the game show. That's all fine. I think the bigger problem is that it is written, the English is written from a very British and Western perspective.
The way they're talking does not track,
and the way the movie is cast. Because you have a lot more authenticity for the younger kids, but for the middle kids, you cast these, Anglophone kids who have gone to like posh British schools, who don't sound like they'd be speaking the way a slum kid learning English would speak.
Sure.
Like these are kids that I knew. I come from a relatively privileged background. Tanay Chedda, who plays the middle Jamal, like I grew up doing theater with him.
Oh, really? Wow.
Ashutosh Lobo, he's a friend of a friend.
Okay.
And as soon as you start casting people from my social circle,
sure,
for slum kids, you've made a bit of a mistake, because we're not going to be able to, at that age especially, bring that kind of authenticity, and that's not what was asked of them to begin with.
Right.
And I do think the middle kids are the least successful parts of the movie. And the movie sort of spends the least time with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also their faces are browned up, which is its own thing.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
No,
okay.
they're definitely lighter in complexion than what's presented in the film.
Okay.
I think there was the middle kids were where they had the biggest problems.
What age are the middle kids supposed to be?
13, which is what they were sort of anxious about. They were like, there's sexual elements to this part of the storyline, especially with the female character. Like, what do we do there? How much do we sort of emphasize that?
Yeah.
Apparently, what's his name? Tanay
Chedda
he recommended the guy they cast as Salim, so they must have known each other.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Like he said, we went to school together. Like meet him. They had no time, so that's when they cast those kids
Gotcha.
at the last minute.
The only thing I know about the casting of this movie is that Danny Boyle's
Patel is cast off of Skins.
Danny Boyle's daughter is a huge Skins fan. He gets this script. He's developing it. His daughter reads it. She's like, "Oh, you should cast Dev Patel from Skins." And he was like, "I'm not casting some guy you have a crush on
from some T4 show." Yes.
Right. And he talked about like how for like 2 or 3 months she kept on being like, "Have you seen Dev Patel yet?" And he's like, "No, I can't find the fucking lead of my movie." And you keep on recommending Dev Patel. And then one day he actually watched Skins with her and was like, "Oh, this guy's incredible. I should have listened to my daughter."
He is good on Skins.
He's really good on Skins.
Yes.
It's one of those things where you're just like, you rarely see teen performances that are that unselfconscious. He's kind of like just the goofy friend on the show. He's very like, it's very different than this performance, which I think is another reason that he was resistant to casting him, because this character is so much more internalized. But he's incredibly good. That guy was just like always good at acting.
The way Boyle puts it is that he had a very clear opinion on how things should be as well, which impressed him.
Patel did.
Yeah, he was coming in being like, well, no, I think, like he wasn't just sort of like, I'm a teenager, tell me what to do.
He seems like a very serious-minded guy in a good way.
Right. Dev didn't want Jamal to turn into a smiler. He didn't want to earn people's love for him in an easy, cheesy way. Dev's got a cracking smile, Danny Boyle says. Could have been an easy option, but he wanted to play him simply, with great dignity. And Boyle is just like, that's when I was just like, this is a star. This kid like understands things more than I do.
Yeah.
Like, I'll do whatever he asks.
I mean,
but he is pretty much the only British actor in the film playing an Indian character, right? Like he's the only British-born actor, I think.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think the incredible calculation on his part in his performance is that he plays the entire thing being incredibly uncomfortable on camera.
He seems uncomfortable.
Right. And it feels like it sells the idea that this broadcast becomes like a national phenomenon that everyone's tuned into.
Like, who is this kid?
Because it does feel like that kind of weird thing that happens once in a while on television where you're like, what's going on here? This is lightning in a bottle. He never warms up,
Riz Ahmed auditioned to play Salim.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, that would be a much better movie.
Apparently gave a great audition, but I don't know, whatever, didn't,
Interesting.
Got in his face, apparently, like ripped open his shirt, went real.
Okay.
Freida Pinto, Indian model, had never appeared in a film before, and Boyle just cast her like, right away. He talks about that, like that she's one of the few people he just sort of cast like the minute she walked into the room.
Yeah.
She's very beautiful.
Can she act though?
I have no idea.
I've seen her in a couple of other things and I'm not really sure.
It became one of those, I felt a little bad for her.
Yeah.
Because she almost became a bit of a butt of jokes of sort of like, I mean, there was that movie that got delayed. Fuck, what was it?
Night of Cops. Is that the one?
Was it? It might have been Night of Cops where you're like, that movie was shot so long ago. Freida Pinto is in it.
That was Lex G's joke. That was pretty damning.
It was, and like,
yes.
I guess I've seen. I mean, remember she was in the Woody Allen movie.
Yep.
That was the first thing she did after.
Right.
Yeah.
She has that, Planet of the Apes, Immortals, and then her sort of two big, the Winterbottom, Trisha, which is the Tess adaptation, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And then she does the Julian Schnabel, Miral movie.
Yes, that was another one that kind of got delayed. I
right.
feel like.
But those were like two like serious-minded directors who cast her as the leads of their films, and it was like, let's really test her dramatic chops. And both of them felt kind of inconclusive, I would say.
I remember she's in the Andy Serkis Mowgli movie.
Yes,
is she? Okay.
One of the human.
Yes, don't remember much about that.
Me neither.
And then there's when she popped up in Ron Howard's Hillbilly Elegy.
She's in that.
I was
as because J.D. Vance married an Indian woman as J.D. Vance's wife. J.D. Vance, now senator from Ohio. Do you know about that? Have you heard about that guy?
Great.
And I remember
I hear
her
his
popping
opinions
up.
keep getting better and better. That's what I heard. He's one of these guys who just sort of keeps getting wiser and more thoughtful.
I remember her popping up and being like, "Oh shit, Freida Pinto," and like, I don't think she's bad in that movie at all.
Okay.
Like it was not one of those things where you're like gritting your teeth. But she's playing a supportive partner.
Sure.
She doesn't have much to do.
Yeah. What's interesting coming out of Slumdog Millionaire is that it led to an increased presence of Indian talent in the West. But in India, unless the actors in Slumdog were already popular, it did practically nothing for them.
Right.
Like no one really had a career in India after
She
that.
talked about I still couldn't get hired for Indian films. Yeah. It's odd. I mean, it is like there was 4 or 5 years there where even if people weren't sure if she was a good actor, it did feel like she was everywhere. Yeah, and it was like she was the spokesperson for different brands. She was constantly in press, and
she was everywhere. As we know, Dev Patel was everywhere.
The two of them were dating for 6 years, which everyone loved.
Anil Kapoor started showing up and stuff. And I think the thing that makes me so mad is that, yes, Irrfan Khan started getting roles in Hollywood movies.
But like the worst, most
horribly wasted.
Right.
Because he's he passed away a couple of years ago.
Which is incredibly sad.
One of the greatest screen actors maybe ever. And Hollywood would give him like guy in helicopter in Jurassic World.
I mean,
he plays basically the same part in Jurassic World and Amazing Spider-Man. Where he's like rich guy who's maybe evil.
Right.
Yeah.
And he like in Amazing Spider-Man he dies off camera in a limo, and in Jurassic World it's in a helicopter. Like it's like the same non-arc.
Yeah.
The best Hollywood role he ever got was Life of Pi, and that is not even a plum role. It's just that he's so captivating in even his limited scenes there, and you're just like, my God, this guy's so obviously. I mean, that's how it always feels in shit like The Last Samurai or whatever, where you're like, hey, why don't we tap some of these guys from? They've got a whole movie industry over there. Let's bring a couple of them in. You know, this guy has like 6 lines, but we'll get a big star because this is a Tom Cruise movie.
Right.
And you're just like, this guy's blowing me off the screen.
Who the fuck is
and you're like,
guy?
well, yeah, because he's a fucking superstar. Like, it's just not, you don't know who he is. Like, and I mean, Irrfan Khan's obviously like also just, right. He's like one of the great actors of his generation, right? Not just star.
And could kind of just do anything.
Yeah.
Right. Not just like, you know, charming leading man thing. Like he was a chameleon, not chameleon, but like he could do anything.
He could do a lot. And like very few actors, you know, are able to touch you in such a deep way. That's
such amazing
like
eyes.
Exactly. That's what my mom always said about him. And like, I'm getting emotional just thinking about him. Like I haven't been able to watch any of his movies since he passed. It would probably be a bit too much.
It was one of those things too where he was surprisingly young. Obviously you knew like, well, he shouldn't, but he was only like 53. Like, I think I would have assumed, oh, well, he must be in his 60s or something. He's been around a long time. Yeah, it was very...
And it happened like weeks apart from Chadwick Boseman.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
It was 2020.
Bad time.
Yeah. Well, nothing else was going on.
Oh, you're right. No. Thank you for putting that in perspective.
Right. He wanted Shah Rukh Khan. Is that how? You know, that was Boyle's first. He wanted the guy who actually presented. The game show, and he was like, "I'm busy." He was nice about it, but he was like, "I'm busy."
I'm not hosting your fake Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Anil Kapoor's son apparently loved Train Spotting and was more interested in Western films or whatever. So maybe that was part of the push that helped get him. But you know, Irrfan Khan, Boyle basically just says like, it's not a big part. He didn't really want to do it. He'd done that part in A Mighty Heart. Remember that movie?
Oh yeah.
Sort of a similar like police inspector role. And Boyle basically just like begged him and like said like, I just have to have you in this movie. You're the best. Especially and he thinks he kind of saves the movie.
I mean, the fact that the movie basically opens with him, like he really does an incredible job of just setting the stakes of the thing. You know, you need that intimidation provided by a real masterclass actor rather than just some guy who's scary and tough.
You also need him to be at the end like, no, you're not lying.
Right.
And you're like, yeah, he knows. I just get that he knows that now.
And he's also part of my favorite like small little moment in the movie that is both funny and it tells you so much about the character, where I think Dev Patel makes fun of the other cop in the room. I don't remember exactly what he says. But so that cop,
he's a hefty fella. More of a comic character.
So they start a fight. I think Dev Patel's character Jamal, he attacks him, and like I think maybe other cops get involved. But like Irrfan Khan barely reacts because he's like, all right, this is not my problem, and he's just like, hey, hero, like as if to say like, come on, just cool it.
Yeah,
he barely moves, and it's so funny
and
because
it shuts
that's
everyone up.
Exactly what would happen in real life, where this guy's like, all right, these people are gonna like fight. This is my desk. This is my space. I don't need to do anything.
Here's a problem I had with this film upon this rewatch. And it was not something that struck me the 2 previous times I saw this in theaters, even when I had cooled on it the second time, but it really stuck out to me here. I feel like this film is like has a slider on Dev Patel's, specifically the character at that age, his intelligence and how intelligent they want him to be or not to add the tension to the scene. And I feel like there's obviously a difference between the whole premise of this film, which is like, here's an uneducated person, right? The basic general knowledge that would win you a trivia competition, this guy would not have gotten from a school. So it is defying logic that he is succeeding so wildly. But I also just think in some of his answers, in like the interrogation scenes, the bit almost seems to be, oh, he's like entirely glib. He is almost unaware.
Right.
When the character is presented as being pretty savvy in all of the flashbacks.
There has to be this weird thing of like, he's like, no, you don't understand. I only know the answers to questions that completely relate to my life.
Which I get, and I get him being like, I don't
But sometimes it makes him seem almost alien, like, or something, you know, it's a bit odd that, he can't answer simple questions.
Right, because it's the gambit of this film is he knows all these answers because he happens to have experienced the exact right series of things to plant these in his head. But then the movie wants to have it the other way by saying like, and he knows nothing else other than these 16 answers. He cannot answer his name. You know,
I don't remember if this was from the book, but the fact that he doesn't know that Gandhi is on Indian money, but he knows who Gandhi is.
Right.
And he's on not just the 1,000 rupee notes, he's on all of India's money.
That's the thing. I kind of
like
call
if you
bullshit
pointed a gun at me and was like, who's on X Indian
That's your
money?
first guess.
I'd probably guess Gandhi somewhat ignorantly. Just being like, he might be.
It's fair enough. Right. And it's like, I understand him saying like, well, I had such a clear burned in memory with an American $100 bill that I'll never forget that. But like anything that wasn't an impactful moment in his life, he has completely forgotten. Like this character almost feels like he's like Sammy from Memento, where it's like he's got the tattoos of 16 things he's experienced.
I will say I do like that when the cricket question comes up. So while I was watching, I was like, oh, is he gonna remember this because the game was on in the background? Right. I'm glad he didn't. I'm glad that the scene that takes place with Latika in the kitchen and there is a game in the background, that's just something he tunes out.
Yeah.
So I'm glad there was one answer along the way.
That's the one where he basically guesses it, right? He does the 50-50
and the Three Musketeers payoff is good.
Yeah, the Three Musketeers.
You front load that, you just feel like, of course, that's going to be the question, and then they flip which one he has to answer.
Right.
Yeah.
He gets bonked on the head.
He gets bonked on the head with a book.
That's going to leave a lasting impression.
But also remove information.
Yes, that's the problem.
You'll only remember Two Musketeers.
Yes.
Yeah.
I couldn't. If you were like, name the Three Musketeers.
Yeah.
Aramis, Porthos. I
think
Oliver
Platt, Chris O'Donnell.
I know it because of this movie.
But
I think it's chocolate, nougat.
Okay, Ben.
Caramel.
It's a good chocolate bar.
It is.
It is a good chocolate bar. I'm just not sure I could name them all, but if you gave me those 4 names, you know, like one of the answers,
you could pluck out
Cardinal
the fake
Richelieu.
one. Yeah.
Okay, not him. D'Artagnan. I'm like, nah, that's the 4th guy.
I do like that the movie captures that in the early questions, where there would always be that cheeky thing where for like the first 3 or 4, 2 of the answers are comically bad.
Yes. Initially, that's what they do.
Yeah.
And that's why the show was well designed, because it got the contestant to loosen up.
Yes.
Because the show is so intense.
Yeah.
But they could be like, all right. So, you know, the United States of what?
Pizza?
You know, like whatever. They shot on location. He used Indian crews, which I think is partly, like you say, informed by the beach.
Yeah.
He was like, I don't want to bring
be an
my
intruder.
own crew.
Yeah.
Like, so and obviously, like, India has such a robust film industry. Like, it's not that hard. But apparently it was unusual for them to shoot in the slums, which they did. Like, that was frowned upon by they were like, you don't want to go in there. And he was like, no, I do. Come on. It's got to be authentic or whatever. Like, that was the thing that was different, I guess, about his approach.
Yes.
I don't know. In Bollywood, like, are they mostly shooting on stages? Like, is location shooting less common? That can't be true.
No,
because I've seen plenty of Bollywood movies that are like gorgeous.
Yeah, there's plenty of location shooting that does happen. I mean, there's stage work too, of course.
Yeah.
But no, there's location shooting to the point that the norm in Bollywood for dialogue was ADR. Every movie would be entirely ADR
Right.
because you couldn't capture all that sound out in the real world,
Right.
even though you'd be shooting in the real world.
Am I incredibly wrong in
Yes.
thinking? I knew it.
Nailed
I
it.
knew it. I knew it. That film shoots are much longer on average in India as well.
Yeah.
That it's a more sort of, I don't know if relaxed is the right word, but there's just like the sort of almost Kubrick approach to like, you take the time you need to get it right rather than crunching yourself into an
Yeah.
arbitrary schedule, right?
Yeah, because for the most part, you don't have to hit a release date that's decided before the movie.
Right.
Right. That's like
Sure.
3 years in advance. This
Yeah.
must come out Christmas, blah. Yeah, right.
I just like, I imagine him coming to Mumbai with a crew that's a lot more run and gun
Mhm.
on a slightly more strapped budget must have been also very odd.
They
Probably.
Yeah.
shot at the Taj Mahal without receiving permission.
Uh-huh.
Nice.
And they because they didn't want to show the Indian government that the scene was about kids running scams
Mhm.
Sure.
at the Taj Mahal. I guess because they were afraid the Indian government would be like, well, we don't want people to think that's what goes on
They
here.
Yeah.
probably would have, yeah.
Right. So instead they just kind of rushed in and sort of messed around, and then they were almost caught and pretended to be like a documentary crew. They were very afraid, essentially, that the footage would be impounded and then
Yeah.
the movie would be doomed.
Mhm.
Like that was their gamble there. The torture sequence, however, gained police approval with one small note.
The torture
like-
of him, the
Yeah,
superstructure.
like you know, linking him up to
Yeah.
cables and electrifying him and all that. And the note was just no one above the rank of inspector could be involved in the torture.
Okay.
They were like, yeah, no, that's fine, but just it has to be like whatever, more
Yeah.
low level guys.
It's
And
the right height as far as like where you're hanging them from the ceiling. That all looks good.
yeah, they like apparently showed them around, and they were like, here's like
Yeah.
a police cell, and here's an interrogation
imagine
room.
How
and
many
here's
bolts?
like,
How
yeah,
many
Yeah.
bolts? Oh, that's good.
Looking
That's
great.
good.
You guys really got the details right.
As much as there are things that are inauthentic in the movie, that was an image that was very familiar from like, Indian movies as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What strikes you as the most inauthentic stuff in the film?
There's a lot of stuff, and individually nothing is too bad apart from the spoken dialogue.
Mhm.
Right.
But just starting with like the title, Slumdog Millionaire, the million is not how numbers would be counted in India.
Right.
Mhm. What does the title of the game show translate to in English?
Kaun banega crorepati? Who wants to be who will be a crorepati? So the way it works is, so you have 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000.
Yeah.
Over here you have 100,000, but in India you have 1 lakh. So that's 1, comma 2 zeros and then 3 zeros.
Sure.
Then you have 10 lakhs, and then you have 1 crore, which is, I think it's 10 million, but it's written as 1, comma 2 zeros,
You're
comma
correct that it's 10 million.
2 zeros, and then
Right.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Right.
So which is why 10 or 20, it's 20 million in the movie.
Yeah.
I believe,
Yes,
the
it's
Jack
2
one.
crore.
Yeah, so it would be 2 crore. So that, but that's a thing where like, fine, it's for a Western audience, you have
Sure.
to translate it.
Sure.
And then there's these like small little things like, the kind of handcuffs that they use, the ones that like snap on, which
Sure.
you use in America, you'll see in every Hollywood movie.
A classic handcuff.
Yeah, those aren't the kind of handcuffs that are used in India, but that's like for the understanding of a Western audience.
Sure.
Interesting.
Because in India at the time it was the Derby handcuffs where you would have to like screw something in.
Oh,
Oh,
really?
that's like the
Yeah.
old fashioned handcuff.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah,
They were trying
yeah,
to get
yeah.
Jack the Ripper in those, but he's staying out of their grasp.
It takes you too long to screw it in.
I mean,
Yeah.
it seems, yeah.
Yeah.
The look, the design of the modern handcuff is undeniable.
Could you imagine if Jack the Ripper had existed in the time of True Crime Podcast? They would have nailed that guy so hard.
Oh, they would be
All
over
the
his
listeners
ass,
would have
his ripping
solved
ass.
it.
When I was a kid, this is hilarious to think about now, or whatever, sort of frightening to think about now. When I was like 5, I dressed up as a policeman for Halloween,
A copper.
and I was given a pair of metal handcuffs.
Mm.
And guess what happened 5 seconds into my kindergarten Halloween party?
Handcuffed your friend.
Handcuff my friend. Where's the key? And I was like, I don't know. Key. And then a huge metal handcuffs.
Yeah.
Not like now. I feel like you get like some
the plastic ones
thing.
that are
Yeah,
easier
right.
to break.
Yeah.
Siddhant, do you feel like
Canceled.
that was a bad choice on David's mother's part?
It was.
No. Do you feel like I'm just interested.
The first time I got to pick my costume, I was Spider-Man.
Hey,
Just FYI.
good call.
Which I think might be the next year.
You saying that you feel like you recognize some of those changes being made as things to make sure the film is understandable to a Western audience, especially since it moves so quickly. Do you feel like most of the inaccuracies, and obviously it's, you have to project intent onto this.
Yeah.
Do more of them read to you as that kind of thing rather than like a complete negligence as to...
I would say so. Look,
Yeah.
again, like intent can be hard to discern, but ultimately this was, I would say it's not really made for an Indian audience.
No.
It was, good for them that it did relatively well in India.
It did, okay.
It came out in January
Yeah.
of 2009. It was like huge premiere and everything. But I would say it's sometimes difficult to watch because, I've written down actually a couple of lines of dialogue that are just like very, very British that, we wouldn't say like, oh, your accomplice nip out for a piss, or like the cricket is on. Well, we would just say the cricket is on, like cricket,
Sure.
we're going to watch cricket, or the match is on. The cricket is a very British thing. But like all those individually like are forgivable. But I think what affects me when I'm watching it is like if you sort of hermetically seal yourself and just watch it for what it is without any broader context, it's perfectly enjoyable. But also as an Indian viewer, based on what I've seen throughout cinema with American and British productions set in India or with Indian characters, and also things that I've experienced in my own life, you can't really separate watching this movie from, I guess, the experience of the movie watching you, or what you might think of how other people might feel watching the movie. Westerners, how are they gonna perceive this? How is this gonna, further, make their opinions of India maybe more negative, or whatever it is.
I think that's so much of the trickiness of this movie's legacy now is like, because it was so wildly successful and beloved, you have 15 years of a lot of people who are like, I understand what India's like. I saw Slumdog Millionaire. And they just take everything in the film as gospel, as like, for a film that is presenting itself as being like gritty. They're like, well, I'm not seeing some like fantastical Hollywood version of this. This was like a serious independent film that won Best Picture. And it's very much a fairly fantastical view of...
I don't know about that, really.
Oh, really?
I think it is like the parts of Mumbai that it depicts.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything horribly unrealistic or made up about it, because one of the reasons Mumbai lends itself to, Dickensian stories is because you have
some of the richest people in the country live there.
Yes.
Poverty and wealth living side by side, but completely walled off from each other. Like some of the, biggest slums in the world, alongside some of the most opulent high rises. And, there are red light districts, there are other things. And like nothing that I was watching, like from the perspective of the space, the environment, that never really bothered me. I think it's more that the movie doesn't seem interested in anyone's relationship to the city or the space around them, other than this is just a plot device.
Sure.
And I think that's one thing the book does better. Again, I think it's an awful book, but it does have much more of a sense of what these people's identity is as it relates to the city.
Sure.
Like, in the movie, the riots, I think they're meant to be the riots of 93. They just sort of like happen in the background and whatever. And like the book, I don't think really covers, specific ground on that, but it does do one very interesting thing. The main character's name is not Jamal. It's Ram Muhammad Thomas. He has a Hindu first name, a Muslim middle name, and a Christian last name. And how he identifies or how he refers to himself depends on who he's talking to, depends on which part of the city he's in. And it's not like a major overarching part of the book, but it does go to show that there's more of an understanding of the religious dynamics at play, the social dynamics at play. And fine, for whatever reason, they chose to simplify it and just have him be a Muslim character.
Although that's not discussed much in the film
exactly,
at all.
Exactly.
Easy to pick up on, to be honest.
Like I'm aware of what the Bombay riots were like, but the movie is not really giving you much context.
Exactly.
For what's
other
going on.
than the fact that their names are Salim and Jamal.
Right.
and with the last name Malik, which are Muslim names, it doesn't really come up other than that they're attacked by a Hindu mob, which is why they see a kid dressed as Ram.
Right.
Which is such a strange phantasmagorical image. Like,
yes.
It is incredibly effective when just because of what's going on. And I almost like that the movie doesn't really explain it.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, they just opened a door and saw this, like, during all of this.
Yeah, like, that's not something that would happen. That's not a complaint.
Right.
Yeah, like, I don't know
it's
why
supposed to be chaotic.
there would be a kid dressed as Ram in the middle of this riot.
Right.
There's usually not a lot of like cosplay involved in political riots. I feel like, Although the mother tell that to the QAnon shaman.
The mother, yes, the mother dying, and then the way he kind of blends that image with like the fire over her face as the flashback sort of like is seen again and again in the movie is also kind of indelible. Sad.
Yeah.
So Dickensian. I think that's why I think some Western audiences were also like, is this movie kind of full of shit? Like, you're telling me like little orphan boys are getting kidnapped and trained and like, you know what I mean? Like, they maybe struggled to like dig into the reality of it.
Interestingly, that part is the only thing they actually brought over from the book other than the structure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing about the kids getting blinded and all that.
I mean, incredibly rough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is the Danny Boyle thing.
Yeah.
There are never, like, the edges don't get sanded off of his movies even when they are bouncier and happier. They also have this kind of like very raw, this is like an R-rated movie. This is not like...
it's the thing that makes it feel so unlikely that
it's like a box office sensation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Is that it really dips into the darkness.
Have you ever gotten chilied in the pants?
No, and
the Chili Willy. They do nail his ass.
I keep trying to decipher what they're actually saying because I love the subtitle of Chili's on his Willy, but they're all yelling so much that I can't. Like, I've slowed it down and tried to understand, but I have no idea what they're saying.
It is a charming moment, though.
Yeah.
The little kids are just so cute.
The moment when he dances for her, is so sweet. That kid is so magnetic.
He is.
Yeah,
he's all grown up now, I imagine. This movie is 15 years old.
Yeah.
Also, we did bring up recently the whole college fund thing, which reminds me, Azharuddin Ismail, who plays the youngest Salim.
Yes.
Ended up moving back to a slum a few years ago. Things just did not end up panning out for him. One of the things with the fund was like it would be paid out to them at the age of 18 as long as they continued their education.
Yes.
But for like a slum kid, that's a very difficult thing to do.
Sure.
To, continue studying when you have to like provide for a family.
Yeah.
And like him and the girl, the one who played the youngest Latika, they were given like apartments to live in, but then the upkeep of those apartments is so expensive that they had to like sell them, or at least he did, the one kid.
That's rough. Yeah. No, I mean, it's like you can make these sort of gestures, but they don't often pay off unless you are actually remaining engaged for a decade plus.
There was also just the sort of weird thing of like at the Oscars, all the kids were there.
Yeah.
And they're all like on stage at the end of the night. And you're like, okay. Like it felt a little weird.
Right.
They were sort of being toted around because you're just like, who are these kids? Like, what's there was,
Well, yeah. And it's, I think, it's often the thing it gets talked about with child actors in general. But like you take a very young child and you sort of whip them up into the whole like award season fervor, and you're throwing them into like a ton of cocktail parties and making them talk to like adult strangers every day for months on end. And then at some point you tell them like, well, now back to your normal life. And it's like, I think that's very disorienting if you're a small child.
Tough. Yeah.
And if you don't send them back to your normal life and you're like, and now you just act in more movies, that's also disruptive.
Yeah, there was this one famous incident where, again, the youngest Salim, like he was too tired to give an interview to a journalist. I think this happened in India, and like his father
dad
slapped him or something like
Jesus.
that.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know. I've had
kid actors. It's a tough conversation no matter what or where. Like you're always kind of like, should this be allowed? Like, in any circumstance.
It does feel like it's just been taken as a given for a very long time, and I've only recently, in the last year or two, heard more people sort of saying like, "Is this ethical in any level?"
Yeah, and like I have mixed feelings of it as a like a child actor myself. And that like it's something artistic training and blah blah blah. But then there's also the argument that like at the end of the day, this is child labor.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And if someone says child actors should be banned entirely, like my knee jerk reaction is like, no, what the hell are you talking about? But then,
Sure.
but then you think about it for a second in the context of what you're demanding of these kids.
Yeah.
And it's like, maybe that's not the worst idea.
No, it's such a psychologically complicated thing. I think acting as an adult does weird shit to your brain, let alone if your brain is still like very much forming and then you throw all the weird, I don't know, the social elements on top of it. Slumdog Millionaire.
Is there anything else specific in the movie that you want to talk about? He doesn't really, he talks about this in the notes, like that he doesn't really distinguish between the periods and the time periods in any
Sure.
way. He didn't want to like throw a filter on or have like a whooshing sound or whatever, like do anything kind of, like now we're going to, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
He's like, I wanted it to be fluid. I wanted the memories to kind of just be as memories really are.
Yeah.
Which like it is like that. He showed the movie to MIA very early because of course he uses her song in the film.
It is so funny.
And she wrote another song for the film
Sure.
that she was Oscar nominated for with Rahman, right? Osaya.
That
She was nominated for Jai-Ho and
Yes.
Osaya, and Jai-Ho won.
I think Osaya is the better song.
You don't like Jai-Ho?
I'm okay, but like I think it's fine.
It's a rousing anthem. It's fun. I don't know.
Well, it's not A.R. Rahman's best work.
Yes. I think it's so fascinating that Paper Planes comes out in 06 or 07.
Maybe earlier than that. Let's see. 06 maybe.
06?
Oh no, 08.
Really?
Yeah, February 2008.
Okay.
So that year.
It just like it obviously the song comes out, it makes whatever impact. And then like 5 or 6 months later, it's in the Pineapple Express trailer. It explodes, right? It's like one of those few trailers that like made a song, but it had already been in circulation for a bit.
I didn't know that.
The trailer like explodes it. It is not in that movie.
Oh, okay.
But like that trailer makes it like the #1 song in America.
Mhm.
And then this is the movie it's actually in.
It is actually in it.
Yeah. But I think a lot of people still think of it as the Pineapple Express song.
Is it not in it at all?
It's not in it at all.
She basically watched the movie and said, you need a scene where you explain how he got onto the show. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And Boyle was like,
MIA said that?
Yeah, and Boyle was like, oh, we shot that scene. I'll put it back in. Like,
Yeah. No.
so he was like, it was a good note from her.
Good call.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But she was obsessed with A.R. Rahman, and that's why she wanted to work on the movie.
Gotcha.
She was basically like, I idolize him.
Great choice to get Rahman to do the music because he's one of the greatest composers in the world. And I'm glad that the West was sort of exposed to him through this movie, even though if you made a list of his best compositions, I don't think anything from Slumdog would be in like the top 100.
Sure.
Even though I like the music.
Sure.
Of this movie,
No, but
though.
right. You're saying like for him, it's like, he helped out. He did a little stuff for you.
But also, so wild is
No
this for
opus.
Indian viewers to see Rahman and other Indian names and faces on stage at the Oscars, because that's not something that happens very often. And then seeing Rahman and the lyricist Gulzar, who is a legend, and he's like 90 something at this point, winning an Oscar for best song. It was huge that these big names were getting recognized by the West, but it was also huge that lesser known people were getting recognized too. Like, how many sound mixers can you name off the top of your head? I can name one, and his name is Resul Pukati, because he won an Oscar for this.
Oh,
And
wow.
then he just became like a huge celebrity in India overnight, pretty much.
See, that's
cool.
It's so interesting because I feel like it's like India has an incredibly busy film industry that gets lots and lots of attention within the country. It's not some niche thing. And this movie, you said, the movie did do well in India, but it wasn't like the biggest film of the year in India by any means. But I do feel like there is that thing with the Oscars where that does give you some sort of weird celebrity in your home country if you win an Oscar for some reason.
A lot of it is also Western validation.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a sort of two-edged thing to it. But like that they'll, especially if you're, if you win Best Foreign Film, maybe for a smaller country, not like
Mhm.
France or whatever,
Yeah.
Japan, the big one, like that you're suddenly like elevated to like this like sort of massive artistic star. That's so interesting that a sound editor would be like sound mixer or sound editor. Sorry.
Mixer.
Sound
Mixer.
It's also
Yes.
just interesting to me that like as films more and more slip away from being like the center of American culture,
I'm trying to
right?
think if I can name a
What
sound
used to be
mixer.
seen as
Still
sort of
hung
like
up on
the
that.
apex of the popular arts, being a movie star and things getting adapted into a movie. That was like the biggest. That's the top of the pyramid.
Mhm.
And like it's definitely sliding here. And then also, I think even just in terms of industries, overseas, like the domestic film industry has become less and less important. As films become less and less important in America, but also like other countries are starting to outgross us. Their films are actually crossing over here more and more. During the Parasite season, there was that Bong Joon-ho quote where they were asking him how much he cared about Oscars, and he was like, "It's a local show. It would be nice, but like I don't care that much about winning the American Film Awards."
Kevin
right?
O'Connell, but I couldn't remember his name
Okay.
Sound mixer?
Right.
because he was the guy who got nominated for 21 Oscars before he
okay.
won once. He would get
Wow.
nominated every year and never
Yeah.
win. And it was one of those things where like, well, they're never going to bring that up on the show because he's a sound mixer. Then he finally won for Hacksaw Ridge.
Oh, right.
And I remember when he won, I was like, he finally
Oh,
got an Oscar. that guy.
Skip leaves a mixer or an editor.
He's an editor,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was going to throw him out and then I thought I'd seem stupid. But
so stupid of you.
The only dumb thing I've said this
the
episode.
only Oscar nomination this movie did not win was Best Sound Editing. It won Sound Mixing
Okay.
because it missed on 2 Oscars, but it was double nominated in song.
Did it lose sound editing to Dark Knight?
It lost sound editing to The Dark Knight.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying, though? It is interesting that, like, even with, like, Bong putting that out from the get-go, you did feel when that movie won all those awards that it was like, oh, shit, this is huge. This is huge for South Korea.
It was the last good thing that happened in the world.
It really
It
was.
really-
Everything was
God.
downhill from
What
there.
It
a
was so nice.
Yeah.
David and I were texting throughout the whole thing, and I'm like, I'm not giving myself credit here, but I was like, I think it's going to win. I think it's going to like sweep. And David was like, I don't know. And if it does, it's going to win one of, but it's not going to win everything. And we were just texting throughout the night of like, oh shit, he's winning all of it. And it just suddenly felt you were like, maybe good shit can happen.
Yeah, and that was
A little sense of optimism.
that was not only the last time I watched the Oscars. I woke up at 5 a.m. because I was in India. I woke up early in the morning to watch the Oscars. And the times when it's been, since then I've been in the US, I think. And I haven't bothered just because I don't think anything can top Parasite winning Best Picture.
Well,
So good.
I know a certain movie star and a certain right hand that would disagree with you.
All right.
Oh, good. You said good things.
Yeah.
Sorry. I missed that part of this. Yeah.
The film got good reviews.
Mm-hmm.
It won the Toronto People's Choice Award
Mhm.
and was the winner of the Academy Award for Best Picture of
Yeah.
the year.
Can I spotlight? Did it not win Gold Globe Best Picture? Is that what you were saying?
Did not win the Golden Globe?
I don't know.
I didn't say that.
No.
Did I say
Okay.
that?
Then
I
I
know
missed.
the director was James Cameron. Was that? No, that was the
No,
following
that's the
year.
following
Sorry.
year.
That's
sorry.
Yeah.
next year. No, it won all 4 Golden Globes it was nominated for.
Okay.
Picture, director,
Song,
screenplay, and song.
screenplay. Okay.
Score. It was partly that the big competition that year was Benjamin Button,
Yeah.
which was a movie that did well and got a bunch of Oscar nominations, but was immediately regarded as a
Right.
disappointment, I feel.
I think from the
because
trailer,
the hype was so massive.
people were like, "Oh, is he about to make his Forrest Gump? Is
Right.
this going to fucking run the table?" And then it was
lost to the Indian Forrest Gump.
yeah. I mean, look, they're similar films in a lot of ways in sort of their
Wasn't
spirit.
there recently a direct Indian remake of
There
Forrest
was.
Gump starring Amir Khan?
It was pretty good.
Is it good?
Yeah.
Should I watch it? I love him.
Sure. Like
How does it compare to American Forrest Gump?
it's not as polished, and
Sure.
like the VFX are so strange because when Amir Khan's younger, they de-age him and they slim him down a bit,
Okay.
but like the entire background like warps around him as well.
Uh-huh.
But it's pretty good.
It's like blurring.
It's pretty good. Also, wait, I forgot to mention this. Q&A is actually a lot more like the Indian Forrest Gump. Because
That
like,
makes sense.
he goes to like war against
Right,
Pakistan.
right.
And
It's,
Oh, like,
it's
he's,
this
like,
man
mixed up
touching
in
all these
all these
cultural
events.
moments.
That's
Okay.
interesting. Okay, right. Whereas this doesn't really do that.
no.
Yeah.
Apart from the Bombay riots, I don't think there's like a lot of like real world moments
Mhm.
that he's interacting with, right?
Very few. No, I can't seem to recall anything like Like there's just some random cricket match on that's like
It's
from
not like
after
the most
first
famous
set.
cricket
No,
match of the
no.
year or whatever.
And it's not
Nothing
like he
like
suddenly
that.
has to sub in and play the match.
Do you care about cricket?
Yeah, I do. I
Do you
love
watch
cricket.
a lot of cricket here? Like, is it easy to watch here?
It's not easy to watch, but also I tune in, like when I'm here, I tune in only during the World Cup once every 4 years. It's the year after the FIFA World Cup, so it's
No,
this
I know,
coming year.
I know.
Oh, sorry.
No, I wasn't saying. I know, yeah. But
I don't know.
I've gotten completely disconnected from cricket since I came back here.
From where?
England. Oh, you don't know that I grew up in England?
No,
He actually doesn't know.
I
David,
didn't know that.
okay,
This
so
is
this
a
was
bit they used to do
for
that they
years and
pretend
years.
they didn't
He's
know
very
that.
defensive because we would always pretend we were hearing this for the first time, and now when someone actually has that reaction,
I had
David
no
tenses
idea.
up, he clenches up.
Oh, that's why you were doing the I know thing. Okay,
Yeah.
I apologize.
I no, it's fine. I grew up in England and I loved cricket as a sport to watch. One of the best sports to watch.
Depends on the format, though.
Yes, I think I would agree with you on that. I don't know what you think the best format is, but
I'm torn. I'm so torn between ODI and 2020.
because I'm a 2020 guy, because that was kind of
Yeah.
what was hot when
Yeah,
I was living in England.
I'll say this much: generally, 2020 World Cup ODI.
Yeah. But I also I love a leisurely. You're checking in with it. You're eating lunch. It's on.
The test match.
I love test matches, or at least I used to. I don't know, but I don't. There's no way to keep in touch with it anymore.
Yeah, even I think like Sling TV might have a package or something
right.
like that.
It would, but I would have to like devote a lot of time.
Yeah,
to,
I'm gonna worry about it when the
Do you
World Cup
care
comes
about
around.
domestic cricket at all, or no? Not really.
Not what do you mean?
Domestic cricket?
Like do you like Indian? I assume India.
Oh, I thought you were-
has
okay.
internal-
Yeah.
Okay.
like-
in Britain, you would call it domestic cricket.
In India, the domestic scene isn't really big, but we have the IPL,
Right.
the Indian Premier League, which is basically
it
club
up.
stuff with cricketers from all over the world.
Mhm.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
I haven't paid attention to it in like 20
Okay.
years, but it's still really huge.
I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
Haven't thought about cricket in a while. I love cricket.
Next World Cup is in India, so
Right.
I might find myself going back at some point because
Sure.
I flew back for the 2011 final in Mumbai
And
and we won.
but I mean, like, was it cool?
Oh, it was so cool.
I
One of the
feel
best
like
moments of my life.
Ben has been holding the mic right under his mouth for 2 minutes, waiting to share some
Ben-
cricket opinion.
What are your opinions on cricket?
I think that the stick
Yeah, that's what we call it.
is pretty fucking good.
Yeah. In fact, at any point, you could have anywhere between 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 and 10 sticks on the field.
Nice.
Yeah, because
Thinking of
I
the
don't.
wickets and the
No.
bails.
The bails too. So you'd have up to like 14.
Wait,
Lot
so
of
what am I
sticks.
forgetting? The 2 bats, the wickets, the
You
bails.
can have up to 4 bats because each batsman could also have a runner.
That's
Yeah.
that would be an unusual,
Mhm.
but right. I suppose you're right.
Ben, as a man of fashion, I think, from the perspective of someone who's not as fashionable as you, but also doesn't give a shit about sports at all.
Yep.
I think cricket uniforms are far and away the best uniforms in professional sports.
Are we talking about the white ones or the colored ones?
Either way, I
Okay.
just think the basic cut
Mm-hmm.
of the thing.
That's fair.
You like the kind of sweater thing.
I like the sweater thing. I like the high socks.
It was a very proud moment for me when I was 11 years old and I started playing cricket and I was good at it. And I remember my teacher pointing at me and saying, "The American's good at it."
Well,
It's a way to
Wow.
shame them that I took to bowling really well for some reason. And I just remember that.
we've
moment.
talked a lot about how you were forced to play basketball because you were tall and
Yeah,
were
and
bad at it.
I lack hand-eye coordination for it or something. Like I've just never been good at basketball. And also
Yeah.
it's so physical. And I just never had the killer instinct to like bash into people. You
Sure.
know, like to really get physical.
Can I call out one scene that we didn't talk about?
Yeah,
Go for it.
sorry. Let's talk about
But that I think is like sort of the most interesting scene. in
The
movie.
cricket scene.
The cricket scene. No, the scene in the bathroom with Anil Kapoor
the scene in the bathroom with Anil Kapoor.
in the middle of the taping,
Yeah.
Right.
where he
Gives
writes
him the wrong answer.
Yes.
Right, where he's messing with him.
That scene and the following scene where he has to figure out, is this guy psyching me out, getting in my
Yeah.
head, or is he actually trying to throw the game? And the tension of like, is this guy trying to rig this for the sake of the show?
Mhm.
Because this is his job. And if this kid keeps on winning, it's going to be a big news story. Versus what the scene ends up being about, which is like, what you're talking about is kind of underexplored in the movie, which is like the class tension of everyone,
Yeah.
you know, in major cities like that, where people are right next to each other, but yet these divides are so large, where you understand suddenly, like, Khan, the interrogation, all of that stuff is just about like, this seems too good to be true. There has to be some scam running here.
Yeah, but what I realized while watching the movie this time is that even though that's what the cops are meant to figure out,
Yeah.
I don't think at any point anyone on the show, especially the host, really believes that he
No,
cheated.
I don't
Yeah.
think
No.
so. No.
They're
Yeah.
with him.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But-
by and large.
But Anil Kapoor is revealing in that scene, like, I don't want you to cross this line. There
Right.
has to be a division between you and
Yeah.
I. You cannot suddenly jump up to my level of fame.
Yeah. And he keeps referring to him as Chaiwala.
Chaiwala.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
He's
the
necking
person who
him.
serves tea.
Right.
Which, you know, at the time was meant to be like a put down.
Yeah.
Although now Chaiwala has a completely different connotation because even though it means the same thing, it is part of the creation myth of Narendra Modi, our prime minister, because he was famously, a kid who sold tea on railway platforms.
Really?
And look at him now. He is a totally not fascist prime minister.
Well,
Sorry, I shouldn't.
successful marketing.
No, you can laugh. It's fine.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that's his like folksy
Yeah.
origin story.
So that
he's
part
mythologized.
Plays very differently
Interesting,
now.
right? Because like, yeah, the whole immediately this kid sits down. He says he serves tea, and you can tell the Anil Kapoor character is like, great,
No.
this
Yeah.
is my bit with this
Right.
kid.
We
Like,
found a dog that
he
stands on
love-
its hind legs.
Yeah, right, right.
Love Anil Kapoor's just audacious enunciation from Chaiwala to like millionaire.
It's incredible.
He's an incredibly transfixing actor.
Yes.
And that's the thing with him in Ghost Protocol. That's sort of the weirdest part of the movie.
Yeah.
Where you're just like, everything in this movie has been so high energy, and now suddenly we're doing more of a dialogue focus, and then like he's like flirting with Paula Patton, and she hits him, and he's like, "Oh, I like it." And you're like, "Whoa, this is so like," but it works for the like sort of Anyway, I like him a lot. As you said, there was the whole crazy thing with it almost going to DVD essentially, and then the festival starts sniffing around, and Warner Brothers is like, "Oh, do we actually own something that's worth something?" Like, and then so when Fox Searchlight is like, "We want to pick it up," Warner's just like, "Well, we're not going to give it away for free." Like, there was like a little bit of
Sure.
But basically, Fox Searchlight was Peter Rice was in charge there, and he was the guy who just like was well known at the time for. I could see the Oscars taking this, like like just sort of knowing what to go for.
And still, to date, their highest grossing film ever.
The film did get a huge backlash in India from some corners, at least. I'm talking Bob Chan sort of condemned it, right?
There was
And then kind of backed off, like
So,
maybe
there's
like there
some
was sort of weird thing
confusion
around that.
about that because some comment on a blog of his
Yeah,
was
a blog.
highlighted. Yeah,
Like,
where
was he writing his blog?
he
Who
was
knows?
someone else had written something that was then I don't know highlighted or pinned. I really have no idea. But yeah, so there's a lot of mixed feelings about this movie where it's like it's exploitative or it's poverty porn, and I'm not going to say anyone who says that is wrong because I kind of feel that way myself sometimes about it. Whenever something like this makes it into the spotlight, obviously there's going to be like more conversation about it. It's not it's not the only film to deal with themes and locations like this. There are Indian movies that have done it as well, but maybe done it in a more nuanced way.
Sure.
I know one big point of contention was the phrase slumdog, which is I don't want to say it's a slur, but it's sort
Kind of a
like
nasty word.
yeah, it's sort of like an insulting way to refer to someone, even though like it wasn't like commonly used in India or
Right.
anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe Danny Boyle said something. He wanted it to be like a portmanteau between slum and underdog, which
Right.
definitely does not come
It
across.
should be Slumder Dog,
Yes.
obviously.
Yeah.
That would have killed.
Yeah.
That's
It
an
would've
extra
made
100 million.
200.
Right?
Yeah.
We had the same
But
240. Yeah.
yeah, I think again the issues that people have with it have at this point been like talked to death. So
Sure.
there's nothing that I can really add
And
to
it's
it.
also look, if you're going to win Best Picture and be a huge, you're going
Yeah.
to paint a different size target on your back, like no matter what movie you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like there's going to be much more discourse about you. There's going to be much more sort of like critical.
Well, and look,
thoughts,
when that discourse happens now, it feels like it's happening in a fairly
in
small
the marketplace of ideas,
Yes.
and the best ideas win.
But
Right?
it's like, yes,
Yeah,
no,
okay,
absolutely.
right.
It's fair and balanced. No, it just now these arguments seem to feel more like they're happening in an echo chamber. Whereas like with a movie like this, you're like, oh, they're actually like there are people who are going to see this at malls, and there are Oscar
Mhm.
voters, and there are
Sure, right.
critic, and there's like a national, international, ongoing discourse about this film that isn't just 20 accounts on Letterboxd or whatever.
What?
I just think it's...
Letterboxd is the greatest marketplace.
I was looking at the run of Best Picture winners over the last 15 years, starting with this.
Yeah.
And like, for so long, either the film that was the highest grossing at the time of the Oscar ceremony would win, or what then wins overtakes what was previously the highest grossing film.
It was a big deal.
It was usually like either it's a final sort of anointment at the end of a successful run, or that is the Kingmaker itself. And you're like, King's Speech has a bit of that, and then it really just starts to like, obviously Hurt Locker at the time is the lowest grossing Best Picture winner ever.
Yeah, and then it's things like The Artist and Birdman and stuff, it became more common for like, oh yeah, that movie did well. It made $40 million.
Right.
It did fine.
Right. Like Parasite getting up to like whatever it was, 65 or 70 was kind of humongous. Whereas Best Picture used to basically be an automatic $100 million domestic, whatever it was. And now it's like, right, Coda, Nomadland, Moonlight. It's what's interesting about this year where, like, I was saying to you right before we started
Coda
recording.
made $4 billion at the box office.
That's it?
I forgot.
Yeah, it did.
And that's only because of the pandemic. It would have made 8.
There was one guy who bought this really big ticket made of gold.
A giant gold ticket.
Yeah, right.
No, we were talking right before the record that it, like, at the time of this record, I guess the Oscars are happening right around when this episode comes out, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. The Oscars will be
March 12th.
They will have just happened.
Okay.
It was so crazy when Ram Charan fell off the stage while doing Nadu.
Wow.
I don't know how Will Smith got back in there.
And Will Smith caught him. It was like a hero redemption moment. He used his hand for good. He caught him with just the one hand. It landed on his feet.
Anyway, I mean, I thought it was nice after The Way of Water won Best Picture for James Cameron to be like, as a special treat, let's watch Avatar 3 right now. And
yes.
they just pulled down the screen and sat there for 3 hours.
And it was like a rough automatic form, but it still played. It was good. It was. I couldn't believe he would show it.
Yeah.
No, it feels like if Everything Everywhere All at Once wins, which seems to be the presumed frontrunner at this moment, we are recording a month out. That will be like the highest grossing Best Picture winner in a good couple of years. 7 or 8 at least, if not more, and like an actual crossover populist favorite.
Yeah, a film that people saw and did pretty well at the box office in the US.
Yeah, and then we were like saying like, oh well, the outside sort of disruptor pick seems to be Top Gun Maverick, which is the highest grossing film in years.
Yeah.
So it does feel like for the first time since Slumdog, you actually are going to have a movie that, I don't know, people give a shit about outside of
because
our nerdy circles.
Yeah, since then you've had this sort of gulf growing between, I don't want to, reduce it and say between art and entertainment, but
right?
The kind of movies that most people go out and watch in theaters versus, the more critical darlings, but also not so much critical darlings as it is its own category of award darling.
Yeah.
Because if I'm not mistaken, David, you might be able to shed some light on this.
Please.
Slumdog was, I think, the film that began or at least strengthened the trend of fall film festivals being a pipeline into awards season. Maybe to a greater degree.
The true beginning of that is American Beauty. That's where the sort of Toronto to Best Picture pipeline becomes a thing. Now it's not a constant thing.
It was the first time.
But that was the first time where a movie like exploded out of the festival circuit. I would say by Slumdog, that's a good question in general, because I do feel like there's not a lot.
I feel in the years in between, you had a lot of movies that would launch at Toronto and would become close contenders.
You get like a nomination.
Like Juno or Sideways or whatever. But this, like, it
like
being
La La Land.
Right.
Yeah.
It being a winner and it basically staying in like #1 position from Toronto till the Oscars.
Yeah, it doesn't really happen again because, Crash is that weird scenario where it's at TIFF, doesn't hit.
Right.
Comes out many months later and then builds steam. So yeah, Slumdog is kind of the second time that happened.
Yeah.
American Beauty being the first. And then after that, it's an easy way to do it,
it's become the easiest
get your
path.
buzz going in the fall, and have everyone salivating. Let's play the box office game.
Real quick before that, I do actually have another Oscar related question. I'm
Please.
sorry. So at the time when this picked up all its Oscar steam, so in India, a lot of us were theorizing that why has this movie taken on the life that it has in the West? Why is it getting all these awards? And some part of us felt like, is this because of like the 2008 terrorist attack that had just happened in Mumbai that
Right.
kind of put
Which
the
was
city,
shocking.
the city on the map on the
Mhm.
global map in a way. Do you, over here, having been here at the time, do you get the sense that had anything at all to do with it?
No, I don't remember. I do remember that. Like that was one of those like global terror incidents that was not just sort of like one day news. That was a very, very massive, shocking event. So maybe a little bit, but the movie is not really, too connected to. I don't know. Maybe mildly.
I think it might have strengthened the emotion behind it, but I just remember that film feeling unstoppable from September on.
Okay.
As David said, there was sort of the lurking in the wings, like, what if Benjamin Button is a masterpiece? And the second people saw it and they were like, it's kind of cold. It was like, done. Okay. Nothing else is winning. If Dark Knight had gotten nominated, then maybe there was a thought that it could have, like, just through pure, like, juggernaut populism won. But then I just think everything only seemed to help Slumdog the more and more that season went on.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I think it was also, bad competition.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
Do you like Benjamin Button?
I do. I think out of those five, it's probably my favorite. Although Ross Nixon did introduce me to, what the whole deal was with Nixon. So
that crazy guy. He was not a crook.
I know. I heard him say it.
This film came out November 14th, 2008. Limited.
Wait. What's going on?
We're going to play the box office game. I'm sorry.
Ben wants to put me in the hot seat.
I mean, we have to.
Absolutely.
There's a quiz in our show.
We've been talking about this for 6 months.
What is that, the Home Depot thing?
Okay, today's contestant, Griffin Newman.
Hi.
So Griffin, this film comes out.
It really does make everything feel more intense.
It's very intense.
Yeah.
November 14th, 2008. Limited release. On 10 screens, it makes $500,000.
Okay.
So it does not become a millionaire.
Yet.
It obviously will expand slowly and gain much steam. But
and hand just hovering over 5 different buttons right now.
Number one at the box office. New this week.
Okay.
Action film.
Okay.
Major franchise.
November 2008.
Bit of a disappointment from the last entry.
What number entry is it?
Well, that'll give it away.
Fuck. That will get, because it's a deep number.
It's deep.
And the last one was really big. It's 2008. And there was a peak. You said Action?
Action.
Can you tell me what distributor? I'd like to
Sony.
use a lifeline distributor.
Sony Pictures.
It's a Sony Pictures. It's not a Spider-Man. It's not... it is Quantum of Solace?
Quantum of Solace. Good job. So you got
Great. Okay.
$32,000.
A film that Freida Pinto auditioned for.
Oh, sure. For the main role?
That music has lyrics in my head, but they're in Hindi.
Well, you could sing if
Do you remember what the lyrics are?
Just the title of the show. Gone burning.
They just keep on singing the title over and over.
No, that's just in my head. It doesn't actually have lyrics.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Number 2 at the box office. Was number 1 the week before.
Okay.
Also a sequel.
But
a family film.
It's also a sequel, but it's a family film. Animated or live action?
It's animated.
It's an animated sequel.
Made $180 million.
It made $180
the American box office.
$1 million. And the box, is it a 2?
It's number 2.
It's an animated number 2 in 2008. It's not an Ice Age, so I think it's not a Blue Sky.
You need to fuck with them more.
Is it a DreamWorks?
What's the matter with you? You think you're so smart in your shirt? He's not that aggressive.
I'm surprised you're able to button it up.
Okay.
Wow.
Is it a DreamWorks film?
Yes, it's a DreamWorks.
Is it?
Actually, it's from Paramount. I'm sorry.
I believe Paramount had a distribution deal with DreamWorks at this time.
It's a DreamWorks
This
film.
film, I believe, is called Final Answer. Madagascar: Escape to Africa.
Correct. Madagascar, Escape to Africa.
Wow.
A
You're
false
on
title.
roll.
A false title. That movie's about them trying to escape from Africa. They
Right.
land in Africa. They're trying to escape
But
from
they
it.
wanted to put 2 in
It's a
there.
Back to
did.
the Future thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Number 3 at the box office.
Should've
Been out
called
for
Back
2
from the
weeks.
Future. Yeah. Okay.
It's a comedy. R-rated.
R-rated comedy in 2008.
Yes.
November.
It performed fairly well,
Mm-hmm.
but not maybe on the level of, say, some of the big, comedy hits of that time.
We're talking your peak Apatow.
Super bad.
And this isn't an Apatow film?
Was Judd Apatow involved with it? Has
Is this role models?
It's role models.
Okay.
Was he involved?
No.
But it has the
Yeah. Adjacent.
good movie.
Yeah. Fun.
Now, number 4 at the box office
Okay.
is
We should do this every time.
It's kind of good.
It's
a
kind of really
number
good.
3.
It's a
So
number.
It's a lot of sequels in this
Okay.
box office.
You said number 4 is a number 3.
Number 4 is a number 3.
Number 4 is a number 3.
It's a teen film.
Oh, it's High School Musical 3 senior year.
That's right. There you go. A huge hit.
Yeah, a Halloween release.
Yep, it's been out for a month.
Yeah.
Makes $90 million.
Also, modern American masterpiece.
And number 5
Mm?
is a film from a great American filmmaker
Okay.
who makes a lot of movies.
Mm-hmm.
This film was Oscar nominated.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's one of your favorites.
But not for Best Picture.
And what do you think you're doing wearing a red hat? You poor jerk. You're never going to get all my money. I'm Mr. Billionaire. Should be like that. What was the question, sir?
What?
I'm just trying to be like, an antagonistic game
Okay,
show.
so listener at home, I'm wearing a red hat.
What do you think you are?
Not a Make America Great Again hat.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot red
It's a
hat has
ski
weird
cap. It
connotations.
doesn't have any
now.
text on it.
More of a life aquatic.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
exactly.
I'm
He's
wearing a
got
Z suit.
Yeah, all right, Steve Zissou.
Much better. I'll take that burn.
What'd you have, onions for lunch? You stink.
Okay, well now he's
Just
just
back to this.
attacking my character.
Ben's really swinging a hatchet.
my breath.
What was your question?
I'm on your side.
Was it nominated for Best Picture? Thank you.
No,
But it was Oscar nominated
for acting.
for acting. It's a director. You said you
It's a
like or
director
we both
like.
We both like, but not one of their better
I think
films.
you don't like this film. I don't think it's one of his better.
You don't think it's one of his better films? Can you tell me which acting category it was nominated?
It's a
in?
number
Best.
3?
No. It was
that was
nominated
High School
for.
Musical.
Oh, okay.
It was nominated for Best Actress in a Leading Role. It also got 2 design nominations: cinematography and art direction.
Wow. And is this? Did you say what genre? Drama?
It's a drama. It's sort of a
Oh.
crime film.
Oh.
Is this Changeling?
It's Clint Eastwood's
A movie I really don't like.
Yes, but an interesting one.
Sure.
Remember how the poster, her head's all big?
Yeah.
She's looking at the kid.
Kid's tiny.
It kind of looks like she wants to eat the kid.
Honey, I ate my kid.
2008.
Yeah.
Changeling.
It's one of the only Clints that wasn't made at Warner Brothers.
Yeah,
Weirdly.
it's a Universal, and I remember that was another sort of like hot tipped Oscar
Yes.
project that kind of sputtered out.
Yeah.
Although it got some attention.
So what was the final winnings?
Oh boy. For him or for Slumdog Millionaire?
Both.
Oh, for Griffin,
$1
but
million.
Okay.
great job.
Slumdog only beat me by 140.
Sure.
Yeah.
Some other films in the top 10.
Sure.
Zach and Miri Make a Porno.
They did.
hanging around.
Mhm.
Soul Men.
Mm,
Is that Bernie Mac and Samuel Jackson?
it is. I saw that film. It was disappointing.
Mm.
Malcolm D. Lee.
The Secret Life of Bees, covered on this show.
Yeah.
Saw V.
Woohoo. No, V. No, never mind.
Oh, bad one?
Yeah, VI is the good one.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah. It's the one about the American healthcare system.
I believe Saw V is heavy on Luke Danes from Gilmore Girls, though, so probably pretty good. And number 10 at the box office, Beverly Hills Chihuahua.
A big ass hit.
Barking its way to 94
Fat
million
titty
domestic.
hit. That movie ate at the box office.
But yes.
Yes.
Slumdog Millionaire is waiting in the wings to take them all down.
Sure.
And be one of the biggest hits of 2008, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's what's wild. It ends up being one of the.
Obviously, the biggest hit of 2008 was The Dark Knight.
The Dark Knight.
And you had, your Indiana Jones,
Mhm.
your Kung Fu Panda,
Your Wally.
your Hancock, your Wally, your Iron Man.
Sure.
Um,
Pretty big.
Yeah,
Whatever
they were-
happened to that series?
Iron Man?
Yeah.
It's
They
weird.
did a
they-
couple of them.
It's weird that it's just sort of like fallen away. It feels like you'd really want to run that thing into the ground. Siddhant, I loved your tweets about Ant-Man and the Wasp.
Oh, which one?
You had a series of tweets before you had seen it about I like this movie. It's a shame it doesn't tie into anything else in the universe. I'd like to see more franchise building.
Yeah, I was
really
doing,
just a standalone character story.
Was doing the Ben Mackler thing because Ben was getting a massage at that time, so he had kind of tasked me with doing that. Yeah.
Right. You had your Jonathan Majors is really good in this film. It's a shame they totally waste him and they're never going to bring him back in anything else. It's just a nice glimpse into an alternate universe where I could believe that was the case.
Ant-Man versus Wasp-Man, Quantum Man.
Hey, and if people want to see tweets like that, they should follow you.
They should. I'm at Elon Musk.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Parody. No, you can find me at Siddhant Adlakha.
And you have a bajillion bylines. You write all over the place.
I do, yes.
And I always love to read your writing. I was telling you right before we recorded how much I liked you did a series on, I guess it was all the Marvel films through to Endgame.
That's right. Yeah.
In 2019 for Slash Film.
Yeah.
Where you really you examine them from a lot of angles, but especially within sort of the American military industrial complex.
Yeah.
And I think hit on a lot of points better than I've seen a lot of other people.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Do.
You're just being nice because I was nice about your performance in the He-Man show.
You were incredibly nice about my performance. You weren't just a little nice. It was it's the exact review you want to read when you play Orko.
Yay. We're both Nepo babies here.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
The whole thing with He-Man for me was like, I don't know fucking anything about He-Man.
Yeah.
So all of the messing with the canon and all that, I'm just like, that's over my head.
I grew up on He-Man.
Right. I knew there was He-Man and Skeletor.
It is
that
weird
was it.
With that show how it's like there are people who grew up on it and love it and like what we did with it. There are people who had no prior knowledge who liked it a lot. And then there are people who care about it too much who are furious. Yeah. But anyway, thank you for being on the show. Long overdue.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you all for listening. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you to Marie Barty for our social media, helping to produce the show.
And
trying
the
to
apartment.
Do Regis. And for her apartment, which became our de facto recording studio today. I feel like I'm losing Regis, and I don't know who I'm becoming instead. Thank you to Joe Bowen and Pat Reynolds for our artwork. Thank you to Lane Montgomery and the Great American Novel for our theme song. Thank you to JJ Birch for our research, AJ McKee and Alex Barron for our editing, and you're welcome for not recording in the studio with the jackhammer.
Thank you to Ben Shapiro for that outro.
Thank you to Ben Shapiro for the outro. Tune in next week for 127 Hours, a movie about a man who is destroyed by a woke boulder.
Is that what happens there? The boulder's just so woke?
The woke mind virus takes his own.
Okay, well...
You can go to blankcheckpod.com for links to some really nerdy shit, including our Patreon, Blank Check special features where we do franchise commentaries and stuff like that. And as always, Danny Boyle loves it when people are covered in poop.
He does.